questions or comments for Kyle? Okay, I declare the public hearing on the public participation plan to be open. Is there anyone who wants to address council on this particular item? Seeing none, we'll close public hearing on that item and entertain a motion approving the public participation plan.
So moved. Second.
Thank you. Those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. Okay, item number 4, administration motion approving limited English proficiency plan.
So the Limited English Proficiency Plan, or abbreviated to LEP plan, all MPOs are required to have their own LEP plan since they receive federal funding from FHWA and FTA. The U.S. DOT and Iowa DOT have requirements and guidelines that they provide to us that we can follow, and this LEP plan was developed using those guidelines. And what the LEP plan really is for is it's ensuring that all individuals that have limited English proficiency have meaningful access to the MPO's various planning documents, activities, meetings, etc. And to do that, the USDOT has what they call the 4-factor analysis methodology, and we implemented that with this plan. And really, our LEP plan follows those 4 factors, and they kind of act as the framework for the plan. So I'll go through each of the 4 factors and then kind of wrap up with the conclusions that we had. So the first factor is basically identifying where LEP populations are located within the region, as well as how many there are within each language group. The second factor is the frequency with which those people with limited English proficiency encounter the MPO's services and programs. The third factor is the importance of the MPO's services and programs in people's lives. And then the final and fourth factor is the resources that the MPO has available to it and can leverage for outreach and assistance to persons with limited English proficiency. So I'm going to basically skip to the conclusions that we came to after following the 4-factor analysis process. And go through, basically, in the conclusion, it lists language assistance services and resources that the MPO will leverage. The first one is oral interpretation services. So using the City of Ames, all staff has access to the Big Word, which is a over-the-phone interpretation service. And since MPO staff are also City of Ames staff, we would also have access to that. The City of Ames also maintains a list of employees that have multilingual capabilities, written or oral, that we could work with if needed. And the final service we'll use if needed is some automated services like Google Translate on our phone if there's no other option for us. The second thing we list is a written translation of vital documents. So per the FTA regulations, the MPO has 3 what we would consider vital documents. It's all the Title VI documents. So the Title VI Notice to the Public, the Title VI Policies and Procedures, and our Title VI Complaint Form. And during our analysis, we found that the Mandarin Chinese language group exceeded the safe harbor provisions thresholds. So we had 2,263 individuals, according to the American Community Survey that the Census Bureau does every year, and that exceeds the 1,000 person threshold. So with that finding, if this plan is passed, the MPO would then translate those to Mandarin Chinese. This is very similar to what SciRite already does with their Title VI documents as well. The third thing we list is we will work with the Bureau of Refugee Services as needed. The fourth thing is the MPO website. We currently have automated translations to over 90 different languages, and we would essentially continue to do that. And then the last thing we list is coordination with regional partners. So working with groups like SciRite and Iowa State, who frequently interact with limited English-speaking individuals, particularly the student body of Iowa State, working with them for language assistance services or any sort of outreach strategies to them. So that's everything I wanted to cover, but open to questions if there's any.
Thank you. Any questions? All right. Entertain a motion approving limited English proficiency plan.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? Those in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed or abstaining? Motion carried. And item 5, motion approving FTA Title VI program for submission to the Iowa Department of Transportation.
So the FTA Title VI program is something that all Iowa MPOs are required to submit every 3 years. This year, the Iowa DOT is requiring that MPOs submit their updated Title VI programs by November 1st, so a little under a week away. And essentially what the Title VI program is it's the MPO demonstrating and discussing how we adhere to Title VI requirements. And as a reminder, Title VI is the prohibition of discrimination based on race, color, or national origin. So we prepared this FTA Title VI program in accordance with the FTA regulations, as well as Iowa DOT provides us a template that we can use and follow, and we use that as well. And I won't go over the contents of it too much because the public participation plan and the limited English proficiency plan are both like heavily related to this Title VI program. And really the Title VI program covers a lot of the same things that those two plans cover. And those two are actually included within this Title VI program as well. I will highlight that at the very end, we also include some demographic maps, and it shows all of SIRIDE's routes, as well as TIP projects and long-range plan projects, and it shows all those in relation to various minority groups and underserved population groups as well. So that's really all I had, but if there's any questions about it, I'm happy to answer.
Questions? All right, entertain a motion approving the FTA Title VI program for submission to the Iowa Department of Transportation.
So moved. Second.
All right, moved to second. Thank you. Discussion? Those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Thank you, Kyle. Thank you, John. Policy committee comments. Start with Linda. Any comments?
No, thank you.
Thank you. Bronwyn?
None for me.
Bill?
None from Boone.
Amber?
Nope.
None from me. No.
No, thank you.
All right, very good. Thank you. Entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
We are adjourned. Thank you.
Thanks for coming over.
Thank you for coming. Good to see you.
Yeah.
See you tomorrow.
Okay.
I don't know. I still like this. Mine was short.
I call the regular city council meeting for Tuesday night, October 26th to order. Welcome, everybody. David, are you here on the OWL?
I'm here virtually tonight.
That's right. What's the map on the OWL? Okay. Just for everyone's aware, we have David is out of town on business, but he wanted to participate, so he is here virtually. So
Yes, on the owl. That's now I mean, yeah, that's right.
yeah, there's two eyes staring right at me. So anyway, we're
He's
gonna,
actually staring at Gloria right now. It's hard to tell.
all right. I'm going to start the meeting with a proclamation. Lung Cancer Awareness Month. Whereas lung cancer is the leading cause of cancer death among women in the United States and in Ames in 2021, accounting for more deaths than breast cancer, ovarian cancer, and cervical cancer combined. And whereas the 5-year survival rate for localized lung cancer is approximately 59%, yet only approximately 17% of lung cancers are diagnosed at this stage. And whereas screening for lung cancer for high-risk individuals using low-dose computed tomography can lead to the earlier detection of lung cancer and save lives, reducing the mortality by 20% when compared to screening by chest X-ray in the National Lung Screening Trial, and reducing the risk of death at 10 years by 24% in men and 33% in women, as demonstrated by another large randomized trial. And whereas organizations working in the Ames community, such as the American Lung Cancer Screening Initiative and Women's Lung Cancer Forum, are committed to educating about women's lung cancer and lung cancer screening and working to increase lung cancer screening rates in Iowa. Therefore, I, John A. Hala, Mayor of the Mayor of the City of Ames, Iowa, do hereby proclaim the month of November 2021 as Lung Cancer Awareness Month in the City of Ames. I'd like to recognize the need for research in lung cancer affecting women and lung cancer health disparities, and encourage all citizens to learn about lung cancer and early detection through lung cancer screening. Okay, we'll move on to consent agenda. Does council wish to pull any item this evening from consent? Hearing none, entertain a motion to approve consent.
Move consent.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call.
Aye.
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 Thank you. We're going to now open up public forum. This is a time we set aside for comments from the public on topics of city business other than those listed on this agenda. Please understand we're not going to take any action on your comments at this meeting. We welcome your comments from the public. We ask people to limit their comments to 3 minutes or less. I do have a number of orange cards tonight from people wishing to address council on the Grove, rezoning, I think, property along Grove Avenue or Grove Street. We're going to take those under public forum because this item is not on the agenda. And so it'll be considered by council as under disposition of communications to council. So there's no action taken and really no discussion taken. So since you are here and have given us cards, I'll call you up after I have Richard come up and would ask you to limit your comments to 3 minutes or less. So Richard?
You know, I know I talked about this before, but it's like I was kind of thinking about going to the hospital board of trustees and speaking there, but they had a virtual meeting yesterday and I don't have a phone or a computer. And it's like I wanted to remind them of the time when I went into their hospital and I told them to kill me because I was so hurt by some of the people of this community. I know I talked about it before.
Richard, please, it needs to be about city business, not about personal business.
Well, I'm part of this city.
Yes, you are. All right, Daryl Reeves.
Could we go in an order where I would go first?
Um,
Bob Long?
is there other people that want to go in order? All right, Bob. If you would introduce yourself, please, and then also your address, and then you have 3 minutes.
3 minutes. Bob Long, 3124 Grove Avenue. My reason for coming tonight is to set into motion, the process to make sure that Grove Avenue is never open to commercial development. The reason I'm going to go first is because I probably initiated this. Earlier this year, I sent a letter in. It was tabled or nixed or filed or whatever, I don't know what your term for no action, because it was only me. One person, one property owner asking to rezone property that I didn't own. I understand that. This past month, we have a neighborhood association. We meet once a year along with a potluck dinner. The group asked me to speak on it. I did. We made a motion, and I have full support of the neighborhood association to ask you to pursue it a little bit, at least get some input from us as to why, we don't have to do that tonight. As you said, it's for a later meeting, but that is why I'm here tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Just as a point of clarification, this could be referred to staff tonight. At the end, it's the last item tonight underneath dispositions of communication to
Correct.
council. But there'll be no council conversation.
That's,
But it
we
would
understand.
be-
We got the
Anyway.
the lowdown from Diane.
Good. Just make sure you're aware. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
All right. Daryl?
Name's Daryl Reeves, 3108 Northwood Drive. Excuse me. I guess I'm just here to echo the support that we really would like to keep our neighborhood residential. I mean, the commercial build out along the street over there on the other side of Grove, we just like to see that not turn into a hot spot of just a lot of activity. We got a nice neighborhood, and basically we'd like to keep it retail. So any help that we could get from the city to help rezone that, to help us at least contain our neighborhood, we'd appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Kyle?
Good evening. My name's Kyle Krebs. I live at 3109 Northwood Drive, and it's a very nice single-family dwelling neighborhood, as is most of Grove Street. And I just hate to see it turn into something. I mean, the traffic going from North Duff to North Grand sometimes gets up some pretty good speed now. We don't need more speed on Northwood Drive. So I would just like to ask also that we keep this more single-family dwelling neighborhood here for the families and the children. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Mike Lee?
Good evening. Mike Lee, 3122 Northwood Drive. My wife and I have lived in that neighborhood since 1985. It's just been a nice, quiet neighborhood. We raised our family. Our kids went to school at Northwood. And, I'm concerned about the traffic, the truck traffic that we will have, and the extra traffic for the businesses we'll have. I managed a store for 20 years. I know there's going to be businesses. I mean, they have supply trucks, big trucks, small trucks, a lot of trucks. So I'm concerned about that. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Jeannie Lee?
I'm Jeannie Lee, and I also live at 3122 Northwood Drive, married to Mike. And we've been in Ames, well, actually, we both grew up in Ames, so we know the community well and been a business owner here since 1985 as well. We have raised our kids in this neighborhood, and while we can appreciate growth with the community, it doesn't feel right in that, and I'm sure every neighborhood feels the same way, but we're already close enough to Grand. When Northern Lights came in, traffic increased, just as some have said, they cut right through there. So adding additional would be, I think, detrimental to the neighborhood and certainly to young kids and that kind of thing. So in support of our neighborhood and the community as a whole, I think it'd be in the best interest to keep it residential.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Larry Brandt.
Larry Brandt, 607 River Oak, which is a little stub street that also is involved in Grove. We have been here quite a while, my wife and I. I have been in Orlando, part of Dallas, and I've seen businesses that want an address moving to like Grove, and I don't want to see the additional traffic that would come up and the number of startups that later become sort of trashy strip malls. Also, I don't like the traffic. Thank you.
Thank you. Marie Meyer.
Hello, I'm Marie Meyer. I'm at 607 River Oak Drive, and our property is bounded by Northwood. You may have figured out we all have something in common, and we are all part of the Northwood Neighborhood Association. At a recent get-together, I guess I already knew where Mary Kay's was zoned high density and allowed commercial. Obviously, there had been a business there. Rumors are there's going to be business again. I was unaware and frankly hadn't checked that the land south of it, which is bounded by Duff on the south, Grove on the east, Grand on the west, and Northwood on the north, was also zoned 3 high density. A proposal was made within the group that perhaps medium density would be more appropriate. It would keep it residential and it would still allow flexibility in the types of housing. There is the south end of corner of Grove and Duff does have apartments, but then north of that are homes. And frankly, the neighborhood association is not just a group of us. It's neighbors who care about each other, who take time to meet each other at gatherings 2 or 3 times a year. From what I understand, neighborhood associations are an asset to the community. It enables you to get information out to us and information back to the city. And as a neighborhood association, that's what we would like to keep, a neighborhood of people. And so people have spoken to other aspects of it, but my biggest thing is I love this neighborhood. I bought the house because I fell in love with it and then later realized what a find I had in the neighborhood I had joined. And I'd like to keep it that way.
Thank you. Dr. Millen.
Hello, good evening. I'm Leo Millerman. I live at 3112 Northwood Drive in Ames. For the public, if anybody's interested, the area we're speaking of is in North Ames by the North Walmart store from Grand Avenue south to the river. That's our neighborhood association. I may be the victim. I'm the chief contact officer for the Northwood, or maybe the president if there is such a thing. So I had a bunch of things to say, but they've said it before. You know, for COVID, during COVID, like you, we were in isolation. We came out this spring and we had, Marie said it all. We have a nice neighborhood. We appreciate it. We had a block party a couple of weeks ago. Bob Long updated us on things you've heard before. I know you addressed this several months ago and only Bob talked, but I want to share with you, we have this and at least 35 to plus others were there that meeting. We were surprised when we looked at a zoning map that there's a small area between Grand Avenue and Grove that is zoned HD, high density. We'd like to keep our area residential. Right now, everything that is along Grove Street is what I would think is medium density. There's houses, single houses, a couple small apartments, and there's no business. And I know you addressed the Sherwin-Williams. I like Sherwin-Williams. I use their paint on my walls, but we didn't want big trucks coming in at 2:00 at night, or what may happen in a high density area. So we would like you to refer this to staff, see if this maybe could be rezoned medium density or appropriate action. I'll shut up, but again, thank you to all the council and staff that devote your time to this. I'll be quiet.
Thank you, Doctor. Anyone else want to address council under public forum? Seeing none, I close public forum. Council, I'd like to just take the privilege of making an adjustment to our agenda. I'd like to move up disposition of communication to council this item, just so those that have come can, instead of going home, watching on TV or staying through the rest of the meeting, know what the council's decision is regarding this. So the letter is in on the dais. You've also got a copy of it previously. Is there any motion relative to the request from the neighborhood association?
I would move that we put this item on an agenda. I think we already have a staff report on it.
I'll second.
Okay. Motion made to place on a future agenda. Is there any timeline, any idea on that? How long that takes, Steve?
Kelly, any problem putting it on sooner than later?
Okay. All right.
So and probably in the month of
November or December?
Oh.
Before the end of the year.
Oh, definitely. I don't know if it'll be the 9th or the 26th. One of those things.
Okay. All right. All right. Everyone understand the motion? Those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstaining? Motion carried. So just for clarification, you want to just explain what will happen then on the 9th or 26th?
Yeah, the council didn't take any specific action regarding the request, but they have asked now to be placed on the agenda where there'll be much more dialogue about the issue. The staff will be able to provide a little background information describing what's being asked, give some of the information you've given about the surrounding property uses. And then the council hopefully will, that night, will make a decision whether to initiate the rezoning or not, or another alternative.
Steve, remind us, does this step kick in any kind of notice obligations for property owners in the area who might be affected?
Kelly can speak to that. I don't believe so. When we start the rezoning, it will. But just to have it on the item, on the agenda to talk about before you take the formal action initiate, I don't believe so.
So typically when you refer a report or a memo to an agenda, there's no notice to anybody in the surroundings because there's no actual action being noticed because you have a suite of choices in front of you. It's then once you make that decision, as Steve said, if you tell us to do outreach meetings, do a study to initiate a zone change, then notice would begin at that point.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, very good. Thank you for coming. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, we'll move back onto our agenda under item number 13. Chief Huff.
Good evening. I'm before you tonight to talk about North Grand Cinema and the Class C liquor license. So unfortunately, the establishment failed 2 compliance checks, which were a part of a grant we received for the Alcoholic Beverages Division to do exactly that, was to do compliance checks with all liquor licenses. In the past, we've been consistent with the establishments that have failed both of the compliance checks. In all of those cases, we have recommended a 6-month versus a 12-month license. In this particular case, after they failed the 2 compliance checks, we did obviously meet with them. We talked about ways that they could approve the establishment, making sure that they're asking for customer identification every single time at the point of sale, utilizing the ABD age to purchase application, so you can plug that in and make sure you understand what the date of birth is and how old the person is. We did give them additional training on July 16th. So that, again, that was after the second compliance check. And in addition, their staff now is also requiring them to be certified by IPAC, which is the Iowa Program for Alcohol Compliance Training. So that's something they do online with ABD. And also they've added some additional software to their point of sale to scan the customer's identification to verify age. So they scan that just to ensure that there's not an error in the math, I guess. And as a reminder about the process, for a 6-month license, you actually deny a 12-month license, but then adopt a motion indicating that you would accept a 6-month if they apply for it. So that's just the process part of it. So again, our recommendation would be in favor of a 6-month license to give us a shorter period of time just to ensure due diligence on their part, make sure that the training is worked, and that these new processes they put in place will ensure we don't have underage purchase of alcohol.
Questions for staff?
I'm here from North Grand Cinema.
Okay. All right, open up public comment. You may come. You wish to come and address council or not?
Oh, no, I mean, I'm here to answer questions. Why
don't you come up and introduce yourself, give your name and address, and then if council has any questions. If they don't, then we'll let you sit
My name
down.
is Diane Aiken. My husband and I, Lee, own the North Grand Cinema. I live on Northwood Drive too, so I think that's really weird. 2918 Northwood Drive. Do you have any questions for me? Do you want me to describe what we've done or what happened?
If you're welcome, we do have a copy of your. Pardon me?
Yeah, we got the email.
Yeah, we got
Okay.
the email, and the letter is in front of
Okay.
us. So if you
And
want,
neither of the employees who failed the check work at the theater anymore. Well, if you read everything, I guess I don't really have anything to add unless you have any questions for me. I don't want to take up time.
thank you for being conscientious of that. Sometimes people want to read the letter. We appreciate that. So, all right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Anyone else wish to address council on this item? Close public input. All right, council, conversation, discussion, or a motion?
I would move that we deny the 12-month liquor license application for North Grand Cinema.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstaining? Motion carried.
And then we don't have to do anything about the 6-month. That's North Grand just applies.
Should we move?
So,
We think we should. You want to
so
move?
you would adopt a motion tonight that you will accept the 6-month license if they apply for it. That would be the procedure that we followed in the past.
Yeah, thank
Is there a motion?
you. Yeah, so moved.
Second.
Okay. Any discussion? Those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. Thank you, Chief. All right, moving on, item number 14, administration resolution approving agreement for water service operations and territory transfer for Xenia Rural Water District.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Tonight, we're here to talk about a unique arrangement that we're proposing the City Council adopt. I'm going to provide some background about how we got to the point that we are at and what the implications are to the best that we can look into our crystal ball about adopting this agreement. So dating back to the time that the Ames water utility was established, one of the certainties about being an Ames resident was that you had access to the Ames water utility. As an organization, we've taken great pride in the safety and the taste of our water and the volume and pressures that we have available reliably for firefighting. And for about the first 100 years of the water utility's existence, there has not really been an impediment to the water utility continuing to grow along with the boundaries of the city through annexation and further development. In the early 1990s, that dynamic changed, and we're here tonight to talk about the impacts of that change. That dynamic changed because that's about the time that rural water providers, in our case, Xenia Rural Water District and Central Iowa Water Association, these providers began to establish themselves outside of the corporate limits of Ames. And that rural water model is quite different in some key respects than the model of water service that we provide here within the corporate limits of Ames. Primarily, it's because rural water is designed to be a substitute for well water, for drinking water needs. And is generally not set up to handle firefighting in an urban environment the way that our water utility is also set up to handle those dual roles. The law 30 years ago established exclusive service territories for rural water providers. Rural water providers had to ask permission to serve areas within the 2-mile fringe of a city if they intended to build or serve customers within that area. On this map, our current 2-mile fringe is indicated in that red outline. The corporate limits of Ames are indicated. Here, I can show you a little bit more effectively. These are our current corporate limits, right? And then the 2-mile fringe here in the red. If the city denied the permission to the rural water provider, then the city was obligated to serve the area that the rural water provider wanted to serve, and had to do that within 2 years to that property. And so in the 1990s and the 2000s, Xenia requested permission to serve areas to the north, to the west, and to the south of Ames, and served a number of customers in those areas. And those were areas that really weren't conducive to the city extending water mains and serving. So at those times, it made sense for the city to waive its right to serve those properties. And so the result of those collective decisions made over the past 30 years is a set of water service territories that looks roughly like this. So you can see on this map, Xenia territory is indicated in this straw color to the south, the west, and the north. And Central Iowa Water Territory is all of this property to the east. You'll notice that the territory that the city of Ames has not given up to a rural water provider is indicated in blue. And there's very little of that property that's remaining that has not yet been developed. There are a few areas that we have available to grow into that don't encroach into a rural water provider's territory. This map shows one other thing that's very important to understand, and that is the growth tiers that have been proposed as a part of Ames Plan 2040. So these darker blue areas are tier 1 growth areas, the areas that we believe are best situated to, in terms of infrastructure needs and so forth, to be able to handle additional growth in the community. Tier 2 is indicated in green. This is generally a little bit further out from the urban core compared to the blue areas in Tier 1. Tier 3 is in purple. These are the more challenging, I suppose, areas to develop. And then Tier 4 is this area up here in orange. The challenge is that these areas that we intend to grow into are primarily in Xenia rural water territory. So what does that mean if our intended growth areas are in Xenia's territory? Well, first of all, the city has...
Brian, Mayor, can I ask a question about the background before we move on to the next section?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't want to interrupt, but so could you go back just a bit? So it was in the late 1990s, early 2000s when Xenia requested the opportunity to provide water. Is that correct?
It was a series of transactions that occurred over time. I think the first one was in 1991, 1990. And that was when Xenia's service territory was initially established. And that included a pretty large swath of territory around Ames. And then there were a series of territory transactions after that. Some of them were wholesale areas that were transferred, or that Xenia expressed an interest in having the right to serve. Some of them were for specific areas or specific addresses or properties or farmhouses and so forth. So there's a whole series of them. They are all documented in this book. This is every document that we have about these Xenia territory transactions. This will come in to play a few slides down the line. I'll explain why that's
I think the history is
relevant
important.
here.
Why did this prior city councils give up the right to provide water?
Well, one, many of the areas that Xenia wanted to serve were well outside of the areas that our land use policy plan indicated we intended to grow. So if Xenia wants to serve a property that happens to be within our 2-mile fringe, but is so far removed from the rest of the main body of the city that it would be very impractical or extremely unlikely that we would ever annex it, it did not make sense at that time to tell Xenia, no, you may not serve it, and we will serve it instead, because then we would be on the hook to provide water service of some fashion to that household or to that property under the law.
And did we receive any compensation for giving up these rights to provide water?
No.
It's not. It's never quite. There's a lesson to be learned here. I always kind of try to preach to the council. I know a land use policy plan seems like a long time, but never say never. So if you just tie yourself to where you think you're going the next 20 years, is not good enough. You have to have the foresight to think past that. There's many examples. I remember the land use policy plan said we would never grow north, if you remember. So our street system wasn't set up that way. Our sewer system wasn't set up that way. When subsequent council made the decision to change, it put us in a difficult position because we weren't prepared to handle all that infrastructure up there. So you got to think ahead a lot, and that's hard to do because people look, council members and the public looks what is happening today or even in your near future. And you really got to look farther than that in the future. Prepare yourself.
Well said. Thank you. Steve covered it. Thanks.
So one of the issues is that the city has no right to provide drinking water to areas that are Xenia's territory. So that the customers within those areas may only be served by Xenia. We would violate state law by providing water service, domestic water service, to those properties. One of the issues, uniquely, is that some areas that are in Xenia's territory, Xenia is willing to transfer to the city of Ames to have within the city's water service territory, a buyout area that historically we have required a developer of the property or the property owner, if it's a single family home or some such thing, we've required them to pay whatever buyout costs Xenia requires them to pay in order to connect to the city. The city has not paid those costs directly. One of the challenges with that is that even if that property is transferred, even if Xenia agrees, yes, we will allow that area to be bought out and served by the city, there are no parameters established in the law for the buyout price. There's no cap. It's subject entirely to whether Xenia and the city are willing to make that transaction and at what price. And again, this has historically been a three-party situation between Xenia, the city, and the developer. So the developer pays those costs. And again, the other issue is that Xenia has no obligation to provide fire protection to city standards. And that involves hydrant spacing, the flows, the design characteristics of its system to ensure that we can connect our fire apparatus to those systems, or that the property owners, if in the case of, let's say, a commercial development or an industrial development, could connect their sprinkler systems, right, and be served with adequate flows. And yet, the city has the responsibility, if we were to annex these areas, to provide firefighting services if those areas come within the city limits. So that's our conundrum, that Xenia would control the water service areas, and yet we would have that responsibility for fire protection.
Maybe just clarify, Brian, that it takes a much larger main to provide firefighting than it does just to have water to someone's house to
Correct.
drink. So consequently, you're looking at larger mains, and also there's a lot more water pressure required, and also the way you construct the water mains and the hydrants and the spacing. There's a lot of cost implications for whoever puts those in.
Yeah,
but there's no customers there to pay for this.
Pardon me?
So we're providing the fire protection, but there's no customers for water.
So yeah, that's going back to the mayor's point. That's one of the issues here.
Yes, that's right.
A rural water system is designed to serve much smaller volumes, right? To provide household level water consumption over much greater distances too. And that has an impact on the costs of the system and how it's operated, the pressures, the flows, all those types of things. Whereas a system in a denser urban area like Ames, our system for firefighting and for domestic water supply and for industrial users is all interconnected, and it's designed in a much beefier fashion, right, for lack of a better term, to be able to handle all of those different needs in one system. So as we grapple with these issues and understand that we need to grow into those areas if we're to fulfill the growth scenarios that are outlined in Ames Plan 2040, staff evaluated a number of different approaches that might be taken with respect to Xenia. One option is to grow in alternative areas where Xenia is willing to sell its water service territory, where it perhaps doesn't have infrastructure in place already or cannot easily get infrastructure to that area in order to serve those properties. And yet Ames would be better situated to extend infrastructure from our existing system. One alternative would be to grow in areas where Xenia does not control that territory. And that means that area sort of to the southwest of Ames, the small areas that have not been given to Xenia over that past 30-year period of time, or into areas that are under the control of Central Iowa Rural Water, where we have perhaps the ability to negotiate a better opportunity, a better deal. A third alternative would be to grow into the Xenia territory and allow Xenia to provide drinking water to those properties, as is its right. But then the city would develop some sort of alternative fire protection model. This alternative could be fairly radical in terms of extending additional infrastructure, duplicative infrastructure, or developing water tender systems that are more typically seen in rural areas, but here we'd be applying it in an urban area, a denser area that has different fire protection needs.
Brian, you mean tanker trucks?
Sure. All of these alternatives have some real challenges to them. The fourth alternative is to negotiate with Xenia to install the infrastructure for drinking water and for fire protection, and also create an environment where certain areas that aren't efficiently able to be served by Xenia to be transferred to Ames. And so that's the option, the approach that we have taken to basically develop the terms that would allow Xenia to come into the future corporate limits of the city of Ames. And so this approach, just so everyone understands, means that there would be two water providers, the city of Ames and Xenia, for Ames residents into the future. Not in the same areas, but much like we have multiple providers of electricity, we would have multiple water providers depending on the area of the community in which Ames residents live. So the agreement that we have developed in working with Xenia staff accomplishes a number of things in order to make that happen in an orderly manner. One, it establishes several infrastructure standards. So Xenia would install any new infrastructure within the corporate limits of Ames in accordance with SUDAS, the statewide urban design and specifications, in accordance with those standards. And that includes providing fire protection and potable water that meet the same standards that we would design our infrastructure to, essentially, in order to provide those services. The costs to install that infrastructure, just as they are in a development that occurs within the corporate limits now, would be between Xenia and the developer. So the developer would be responsible for the cost to put together the larger mains, the number of hydrants that are required, and so forth, in order to meet SUDA standards, urban standards. Xenia would also design any new infrastructure that would be going into areas Ames has designated for future annexation. It would design that infrastructure to meet those standards as well. So that is areas outside of Ames that we intend to grow into, those tiers that are established in Ames Plan 2040. And there would be no obligation for Xenia to upgrade existing infrastructure immediately. This is sort of analogous to the situation that we have in our East Industrial area. You know, we annex that property and it comes into the corporate limits of Ames. We are required to provide fire protection to it right away. But just because we annex a property one day doesn't mean that 6 and 8 inch and 12 inch water mains appear overnight, right? It takes some time. We would have, this creates the possibility that there will be certain areas that aren't developed that would remain on sort of this legacy Xenia infrastructure for some time until development does occur, until that infrastructure needs to be replaced, at which time it would become compliant with SUDA standards and meet the appropriate spacing and main sizing and so forth. I should take a moment and recognize that the discussions that we've had and how this would all work has been internally among Kelly from Planning and Housing, myself, Steve, Public Works, and the fire department. So we've all had involvement in, and also Water and Pollution Control, of course, we've all had involvement in ensuring that we would be able to adequately provide fire protection and service to the folks who need it, who are subject to this agreement. Under the agreement, the city would have the ability to operate Xenia's hydrants in an emergency situation at no charge. So if a fire were to occur or some other emergency situation that required access to the hydrants, we would be able to access the hydrants. We would not be charged by Xenia for it, for fighting a fire. Xenia would be responsible for maintaining the hydrants and the other aspects of the distribution system, and would communicate with the city when those hydrants were out of service for some reason. So, for example, if one was damaged, they would notify us so we know not to rely on that hydrant if we had to respond to an emergency. There are some standards included in the agreement that indicate what Xenia's responsibilities are for maintaining and repairing water main breaks. These are really the kinds of standards that Xenia is going to want to meet anyway. They have customers who are going to be reliant on water. They don't want to have boil orders or things like that, just as we don't. So it's in their interest to respond as quickly as possible to make repairs and protect the users and the infrastructure. We did put in a provision that would require Xenia to notify the affected residents if they're in the city of Ames, and then also let the city know, so that if there's a situation where a customer is confused about whether it's a Xenia, if a water main break that's our responsibility or Xenia's, we would be able to respond and inform them and get them pointed the right direction. But we as a city organization would have no responsibility to make the repair, of course, because it's not our infrastructure.
On that, are we confident in their ability to adequately repair these water main breaks in a timely fashion?
We discussed the possibility of putting in place performance standards, in terms of the timeliness, how quickly it must be repaired, but we were not able to get that term into the agreement. I think we're, as a water provider, if Xenia has a water main break, obviously that's lost revenue, that's potential risk to the rest of their system. So I expect that they take water main breaks seriously enough that that these would not be.
But yet they weren't willing to negotiate that as part of the contract.
Well, part of the issue is determining what happens if that's not met.
No.
Right.
The people of Ames are very well served by our staff in handling water main breaks. I mean, these guys are amazing. 2:00 in the morning,
Right.
middle of winter,
All weathers, yeah.
they are there.
I think, and I'm not being critical of Xenia at all, but I would think our service would probably be better. We have a smaller service territory to respond to. So they have a huge service territory. We will get there quicker. And I'm not going to stand behind the quality of work. And I'm not saying it's negative either. I want to make sure I emphasize that. I would guess that our service would probably be better. But I even think we were talking about, is it possible for us to provide the service and they pay us for that service? But I think they feel confident they can provide the service to the customers in that area.
I mean, that's something that we should be watching long-term just to see how their team handles it. But I put us up next to anyone in the state on that area.
Well, and one thing to point out too, this might be a good time to do that. Anybody who's a customer of Xenia has the right to vote in their board elections and so forth. They have the ability to influence Xenia policies. So if they have an issue with how they are treated as customers, they have that recourse too.
I think we have that issue right now in electricity. As you know, not all citizens of Ames have the municipal electric utility. I would put us up against anybody in terms of response of our electric line crews and reliability, continuation of service. But it's kind of the fact of life in the service territories.
Yep.
So one of the challenges that we have is that we operate multiple utilities, right? We operate a water utility, a wastewater utility, a storm water utility, an electric utility. We have some efficiencies built in that if you are an Ames water user, we can calculate your sewer charges based on your water consumption. We don't meter sewer discharge. That's not a very convenient thing to do. I'm not sure if it's even technically, feasible, but that's how we do it, right? And that's how virtually every water and sewer provider combined do it in the country. So we will have a situation, however, where we would have customers who are Xenia customers for water, but they are City of Ames customers for sanitary sewer and for storm sewer. We'll have some customers who are also Ames Electric customers. And we also have a situation where the city may, years from now, develop some additional service that we want to have provided to every household in the community. We don't even know what it is yet, but we may want the opportunity to use that efficiency that we have right now in being able to bill it rather than establish additional bills. So what we have agreed to with Xenia is that Xenia, of course, as the water provider, they would not be allowed by this agreement to charge higher rates to Ames customers than any of the customers elsewhere in their service area. So their service area extends across a large area of Iowa. They would not be permitted under this agreement to charge some differential rate that impacts Ames customers negatively. So a little protection for Ames residents. Xenia would collect the sanitary sewer and storm sewer charges for the city of Ames on our behalf. We would tell them what rates to charge when they have a new customer that signs up. They would charge that customer for Xenia's water. They would then calculate what the sanitary sewer usage converts to in terms of a bill, and then they would also know what the stormwater charge is. They would bill that, then they would remit those payments to the city of Ames in one big check every month, and then provide us also with records that we can use to audit that set of transactions and ensure that it's being appropriately collected. Xenia, by our agreement with them, would be permitted to charge its customers $1.50 per month per bill for the costs associated with billing Ames utilities on its bill. There's some protection built into that provision such that that amount could increase over time, but it could never exceed the actual cost to collect the city's bills. And it also couldn't be higher than what they charge other people in other communities if they perform this same service. So there's two protections, I guess, against gouging or collecting additional revenue off of this that may be unwarranted. And then again, we would reserve the right to add any additional billing responsibilities in the future. So if we provided some service in the future as a city that was conveniently provided to every household in the community, or if there was some future charge that we have not yet conceived of, we could add that into Xenia's responsibilities. We would not have to amend the agreement in order to fold that in. So one of the big issues that we've had over time is understanding where the territories lie exactly between Xenia and the city of Ames. So this agreement settles and clarifies a variety of things for us in one comprehensive fashion. It clarifies where Xenia's territory is with respect to Ames. It clarifies where Ames's territory is. It addresses 10 specific properties that have been affected by differing interpretations of the boundaries over time. This is, for shorthand, we call it sort of the house versus the acreage disagreement or interpretation issue, where these 10 properties were requested by Xenia to be added to its territory. And we differ in our opinions about whether that request was to serve the house or to serve the entire acreage that that house is on. So the agreement basically resolves that with what's a compromise that gives us a clear path to addressing these 10 properties in the future. And I'll explain that in a few moments. And it also identifies a number of areas within Xenia's territory now that aren't readily able to be served by Xenia. So if those properties developed and divided, Xenia would have pretty considerable expenses in order to be able to serve those properties. It would be more efficient for those properties potentially to be served by Ames. And so it establishes where those areas are, and it provides some guarantees that if those areas are requested to be transferred, Xenia would not object to them being transferred. They're divided into two sort of sub areas. There's areas that are really well situated to be served by Ames. They're right next to Ames. And there's areas that are possibly situated to be served by Ames, but it's dependent on a couple of more things. It's a little more tenuous. And so we've set up sort of differing time frames for those decisions to be made. And I'll discuss those in detail here too. But the advantage to this agreement is that it takes all of these transactions that have taken place and all of this documentation, which at times we have disagreed about the interpretation to, or at times has been incomplete over the past 30 years, and settles it and with a new map. So we won't have those disputes moving forward. The 10 properties that are affected by the boundary interpretation issues are indicated here on this map. This is an exhibit to the agreement. It's a number of particular properties, mostly on the west side of Ames. There's one property down here on 265th Street that's also impacted. And basically the arrangement that we've agreed to would be that Xenia would sell that territory and would allow it to be bought out and incorporated into the Ames territory, but would cap the maximum buyout at 3 acres per property. So if a property was 1.5 acres, the buyout for that property would be 1.5 acres. If the property was 40 acres, the buyout would be 3 acres. It could never be more than 3 acres. And I'll explain what the equation is, what the costs are per acre in just a moment here too. So the negotiable areas, they are renewable depending on what has changed into the future, up to a term of 35 total years. If Xenia or Ames decides not to renew into another 5-year renewal period with each of these areas, we would have to notify the other 12 months in advance. So we have a little bit of time to make some decisions about whether we want to give up the potential to have that area bought out and included into Ames or not. We have included in the agreement that we have the option to agree on other areas that aren't even discussed specifically in the agreement and transfer them from Xenia to Ames, depending on the circumstances into the future. And if that was to happen, it would be undertaken using the buyout formula that's included in the agreement. Xenia asked for this provision that if the buyout option is canceled, which would allow Xenia the guaranteed right to retain that area, and Ames could not buy it, then Xenia and Ames would have to sit down and discuss the possibility of buying wholesale water from Ames to serve those areas. That has some advantages to us in that we get to spread our capital costs a little bit further across the water utility and sell more water, and not quite run into a sudden decrease in the amount of water demand that we're planning for into the future. There are no guarantees, however, that Xenia or the city would agree to those terms. It's just that we simply must discuss it if it got to that point. So here's the buyout formula. It's $3,000 per net acre, and that net acreage excludes right-of-way. The $3,000 per acre increases every 5 years by some standards related to the Consumer Price Index. So this is important because it puts a cap on what developers may be required to pay in order to transfer territory from Xenia to Ames. Right now, as I mentioned earlier, that price is whatever Xenia and the developer agree to. So this puts some limits on it. And it, in fact, is less even than some of the previous buyout costs that developers may have been experiencing with Xenia in other areas. So this is also comparable to the buyout cost that was included in the Central Iowa Water Agreement that was approved about 5 or 6 years ago now. It's slightly different, but that was several years ago. So this one it's in the neighborhood of the buyout formula cost. So these buyout areas and the cost formulas will be in effect, depending on the area, 5 to 10 years at a minimum for a maximum of 35 years. After 35 years, there's no more renewals of those provisions. All of the terms in the agreement about Xenia serving within the Ames corporate limits, those terms of this agreement last in perpetuity. So unless we both mutually agree to make changes to the agreement, Xenia must meet all those terms for meeting our SUDA standards, including certain local amendments and the billing and all of those components. I think it's important to understand that, again, since Xenia is a rural water model, their water rates are different than the water rates that would be experienced by Ames customers. I realize that this chart is a little difficult to read due to the sizing. It's in your packets, but these two columns indicate Ames's rates. There's a minimum charge, and here are the winter rates for residential, and the minimum charge in green plus the summer rates over on this column, and Xenia's rates are over here. These examples are the examples that John Dunn puts in front of the City Council when we go to talk about a water rate increase. So these are three different typical customers that we would see or three typical residential use examples. So a small residential customer who uses 100 cubic feet of water in a month, which is equivalent to 748 gallons, since Xenia bills on the gallon, we bill on the cubic foot. Their bill for water alone would be $15.72, and it would be that way whether it was winter or summer. The way our summer rates work, they only kick into the higher rate above a particular usage level. So about $15.72, that customer would see a bill of $65.20 from Xenia for the same water consumption. A 600 cubic foot customer in Ames would have a bill of $28.57. For Xenia, that same water usage is $104.20. A large residential user with 1,000 cubic feet under Ames would have $38.85 for a monthly bill. With Xenia water, it would be $143.20. So these rates are substantially more depending on the amount of usage that a customer experiences. This also has some impacts with the commercial. In these examples, so this includes our minimum charge plus the rate for the water consumption. Depending on how much water you use, you experience a different minimum charge, right, to determine what meter size you have. Xenia's rates are the same whether you're a residential user or a commercial user. So a small commercial customer in Ames, 600 cubic feet of water would be $28.57 in the winter and $33.37 in the summer. It's a little higher in the summer for that last bit of consumption. Overall. For Xenia, that customer would experience a bill of $104.20. Okay. It's a similar experience with the median size customer, 1,000 cubic feet under commercial. For Ames, it would be either $38.85 or $46.85 per month. With Xenia, they'd pay $143 per month. Large commercial customers, so this is 3,000 cubic feet. An Ames customer at that consumption would be $103 to $127, depending on the time of year. For Xenia, it would be $240 per month. This, obviously continues depending on the volume of water that you're using. In Ames, you'll have different minimum charges based on the meter size and so forth. Xenia has 4 industrial customers, or at least had 4 industrial customers a couple of years ago, and that's a different rate structure. I don't have the specifics about how that works. They pay a fixed minimum amount and then additional beyond whatever they're provisioned for, in terms of the number of gallons per month that they're provisioned to use. So there are some impacts. And I bring this up because this is the kind of thing that could surprise someone if they were to move into a house in one of these areas and find out that their neighbor or a friend of theirs who's 2 blocks away has a bill that's 1/3 the amount. And again, this is in addition to the charges that somebody would see for sewer and for electric and for storm sewer. So those are all going to be combined, with the exception perhaps of electric. Now, just to provide some orientation to where these different areas are that are impacted by the different buyouts and so forth. Again, this is our current corporate limits and our planned growth tiers. This is again Ames territory, Xenia, and central Iowa. These are the 3 large areas that are going to be carved out in the agreement as eligible for a 10-year period for a buyout without Xenia objecting, basically. So if these areas request a buyout, Xenia would grant it once the fee of $3,000 per net acre is paid. These areas were identified because they are in our primary growth areas and they are more likely prospects, I suppose, to develop here in the near term. We knew that it may be difficult for those areas to develop in 5 years exactly because of the amount of time that's required once you pull the trigger and go through to begin that process of annexing and subdividing and getting zoning and all of those things. So we asked Xenia for a 10-year period of time because that seemed more realistic to be able to get these areas situated and incorporated into the city if they do develop. There are these areas here towards the south that are in the black single hatching here. These are additional areas that, again, are difficult for Xenia to serve. They are less likely to come in to the corporate limits of Ames anytime soon. So our hope is that we would just simply continue to automatically renew this provision until these areas are situated to come into Ames, and then they'd be able to be bought out. But other than these areas, everything outside of these boxes and the blue shading would be Xenia territory to serve, unless agreed to through some further agreement. So this draft agreement that's in front of you hasn't yet been approved by Xenia's board of directors. We've held a number of discussions with Xenia staff, and those discussions were very productive in getting us to this point where we could feel comfortable as city staff recommending this agreement to you, and where Xenia staff could feel comfortable recommending the agreement to the Xenia board for approval. If the council approves, then we'll notify Xenia and it'll be in their court to consider approval. And then upon Xenia approval, there's one additional step where Xenia must receive consent from USDA Rural Development because this impacts their water territory and the rights that they are retaining or giving up. And then once the agreement is recorded, it goes into effect. So I thank you for letting us take time to go through this in some detail. This is a pretty substantial change from how we've operated previously. And it's going to set the stage, hopefully, for orderly water service and growth into the future. And we didn't get everything that we wanted out of this agreement, but we do think that it accomplishes what it needs to accomplish to provide adequate service to the community. Unless, Kelly, do you have anything to add? Or we'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
I guess the thing to add is just the timing is situated well for Plan 2040. I think you have the Plan 2040 on the table tonight next. You've been looking at that for over 2 years, as we've illustrated. if you want to do what's in that plan, you do not have water territory to meet those objectives yourselves. So this is the best effort, as Brian said, that we could come up with to try to see the vision of this plan forward. So it's really kind of taking council's plan and moving it forward to try to let this happen.
Okay, thank you, Council.
What about Central Iowa territory?
So we have an agreement, maybe Steve or Kelly could talk about the
For the 6th
specifics
year.
of it. We have an agreement.
10 years, we're in the 6th year now.
Yep, we had an agreement that was arranged 4 years ago, and we have, or I'm sorry, 6 years ago, we have 4 years remaining. And that was for the East Industrial area specifically, correct?
Right. Just
About 1,200 acres,
Yep.
all the way out to 590th on both sides of Lincoln Way. That's where our water and sewer line is going into service at strictly industrial right now.
So at some point in the future, we may have to come back to the council and decide what do we want to do as that agreement reaches its expiration. Do we want to attempt to
The
negotiate
difference in that one,
further?
they have already agreed to sell it out
Yes.
at a certain price. It's actually the same kind of formula we have. We mirrored the formula from that agreement. So if we have a company comes in town, wants to develop in that area, we have a guaranteed buyout, and they agreed to sell all those 1,200 acres on request. Now that
What if they, hypothetically, what if nobody were to move in and we were already to have put the infrastructure there and they don't get bought out?
hypothetically, what will happen? Are you saying we'll stay status quo? We'll have to decide what to do.
Well, I mean, once we have the infrastructure in there, then the negotiating is even less favorable for us because we would pay more to keep it, right?
Yeah, they can't use it either. They won't be able to use it either.
No, but they
So
know
they'll have
that
to
we would
decide.
want to, right?
They have to decide whether they want to take cash or that they want to invest a lot of money in infrastructure.
I guess I was talking about the non-industrial area parts.
Oh.
personally, but I mean, it's good background to have for that industrial area territory. But what about
Up here, if we make the investment,
the rest of the expansion area in Central Iowa territory?
So the east growth area is what you're talking about, right? So
oh, interesting.
other than I met with a preliminary meeting, just like I did with Xenia, with the representatives, and they're just, vaguely, yeah, we'd be willing to negotiate. There's no commitment or.
So you didn't hear a no from them?
There's definitely no
necessarily.
no's from So Xenia reacted a little bit differently. They said, no, we don't want to do that for the west and for the north and part of the south. Central Iowa is like, we'll consider it, we'll propose it, or we'll review it just like we did for the industrial area when you have a specific proposal.
Okay.
So they
I see.
reacted a little bit differently.
It's just that we haven't pursued one with them.
We
at
have
this
not,
time.
for the most part, because the east growth area, there's
Yeah.
very little tier one that's not already in it. So the LL properties, the commercial and industrial area out there, it's already Ames territory.
Sure.
And that has to get developed before we can even get to the residential part. So
Yeah.
there wasn't an impetus to go that way.
Sure. The hurry is on the other three. I could see. Yeah, that makes
Yeah, so we really needed to deal with Xenia first, and we have 4 years left on the Prairie View Industrial Agreement. So it would behoove us in the next year or two to probably restart those negotiations on how that can work or
Sure.
extend it.
Yeah.
And now we have more territory on Teller that we've annexed also that's not in that. The interchange is now getting built. So there's a lot more around the east area that needs to get covered that wasn't anticipated 6 years ago either.
Sure.
well, I thought you were going to ask the question, even under this, what if we put some of those water lines and sewer lines to set up those tiers here and nothing develops?
Yes, that is also a question.
And then they take it back in 5 or 10 years. Well, the good thing about this, as we approach our 5-year or 10-year, you'll have an opportunity up to that last day to buy out that territory. The city could buy it out
And then
and have
hold it
connection
and
fees and then recoup it as they do that. You prefer not to make that investment.
Yeah.
You hope it'll be done over time as specific industries come in town and they'll pay for that.
Right.
But we have an out so that that money is not wasted in essence.
Sure.
So I think we've got some options for you.
Okay.
I guess we would say that they should be in the same spot as when they made the agreement with us if they don't want to spend capital, because as far as we know, they've made no other investments on this side of Ames to change the financial position that they're in.
You're talking about Central Iowa?
Yeah, for making those capital investments that they didn't want to make in the first place.
Yeah, certainly when it talks about servicing industrial property and such.
Sure.
But I don't think they could service residential either. So we'll have to see.
Interesting.
Well, I'm sure they're waiting for their first buyout too. So they'll recoup some of the money. They've not had any revenue from us yet either.
Right.
The sewer line will make it, the sewer and water will make a difference. Now we'll see.
Yeah.
If we're able to start filling up that area.
Thank you.
Other questions?
I have one question and a possible follow-up. Do we know if there are ongoing efforts to lobby at the federal level to loosen the grip of the rural water districts?
We've tried, as you know, we went to Washington DC on a number of occasions, and we went to the Department of Agriculture and talked to senators. They've always told us, the Iowa senators, unless there's other states that get involved, senators involved of larger magnitude, we probably won't be able to shake the system loose. And we did find perhaps some cities in Oklahoma and other areas, but not enough, I think, to offset some of the other rural interests who are fighting to keep that system in place. So that's what we had to decide. Should we keep fighting? The risk here, if we didn't make a deal and there was no sale to be had, and you didn't want to bring the rural into our city limits, basically there'd be no growth here. So that was a tough decision for us. So I think you've got to give a little credit to Xenia too. They were able to sit down and talk to us. I'm sure they didn't have to give in anything, quite frankly, and they could have kept the status quo. So they tried to work with us as much as possible. And I think they realized that there are certain areas they don't want to invest in, right? There's substantial costs away from their existing infrastructure. So there could be a win-win. But I don't believe at this time that there's any sense that there's going to be change in that whole political area, all the protection given by the federal government. Now, that's a good thing. Because you might say, why don't you get a 50-year agreement? Maybe it's not so good to have a 50-year agreement, because in 10 years or 5 years, the world may change, and it may give us put us in a more advantageous position to negotiate. So it's a balance here. I think I would have thought, I'm a little nervous about the 5 years, because it takes a number of years just to design and put utilities in. But the 10 years I feel more comfortable with. So we're all dealing with the unknown. We're all a little bit nervous. But I think what Kelly says, if you really want to start developing, expanding, or implementing this plan, this will get us going on it. And I think the exciting part about it, either you'll see that, well, we'll talk about later, we're going to start giving you some options to put infrastructure in, so we can really put infrastructure in these areas so we can move forward. Many times we had a land use policy plan, but no way to put the infrastructure in, so we couldn't achieve the growth. So with some of the CARES money, you'll see some options for us moving ahead with it. So I think it's kind of exciting, a plan that's going to be implemented. Don't you like to see that every once in a while instead of putting it on the shelf? So I think it'll be good news for all of us.
A couple more questions.
Oh, did you?
I was just going to say, you answered my follow-up question, which was, do we have the flexibility because of the 5 and 10 year to pivot if we need to?
I think that's what it gives us.
Tim?
So I'm always apprehensive about taking on other people's infrastructure when we annex areas. And so I want to just ask, according to the agreement, they're required to install this infrastructure according to certain design standards. But is that equivalent to what Ames would do? Is there any difference?
Yeah, so that was a big part of the negotiations with our public works and our staff and our fire department staff, was what's the right language to say, can Ames fight a fire here when it's served by Xenia infrastructure? So yes, they're meeting SUDAS standards, the same that we have adopted in our municipal code, and there's 2 local amendments that we have that they're going to agree to. So whenever infrastructure goes in, it will meet those standards. The tricky part is those existing areas are not being upgraded until such time as they need to be replaced at the end of their life, or some other capacity increase is needed. So new things will absolutely match city standards, just as if we were having it put in. And for developers, it's the same also. So if you were building it at Ames, you're gonna have the same cost to have it built by or in Xenia's territory. It's the same facilities.
And the way that it's phrased in the agreement, it's the SUDAS standards as they may change from time to time. So it's not the standards that exist in 2021 and they never have to follow and keep up with whatever SUDAS amends its standards to into the future.
Plus our local amendments.
Plus the local amendments.
Related to
critical crossings. So where you have a water main crossing a sewer line, for example, and hydrants.
So should we be concerned that there are existing areas that have a different standard of infrastructure?
So it's really hard to deal with that. So we've 80-20'd people into the city. there's no upgrade of infrastructure. We 80-20 people in unwillingly when they come into the city. They stay on a Xenia service or they stay on a well. There's no fire hydrant in front of their house. Those kinds of situations are going to happen with this arrangement as well. I think the place that I kind of look at is it's going to be the hardest place to kind of match up vision of the comp plan with the practicalities of utilities will be that West Lincoln Way area into Boone County, where you have a pattern of development along Lincoln Way that's served by Xenia. How exactly use of that land in still meeting our building code requirements and our fire code requirements, knowing that the infrastructure there isn't exactly city infrastructure, those property owners are probably going to take on more of a burden to meet fire code and building code requirements. But as we went through this, we also found out that essentially fire code minimum standards are kind of universal across the state. So if you're building in the county or you're building in the city, there's a minimum fire protection requirement. So some of those facilities, they have on-site auxiliary equipment and facilities to augment fire protection. And that's something that our staff will have to look at when we do site plan reviews for those older sites or those legacy areas that are in Boone as we ever get to those and annex those.
That's very helpful. Thank you. I'm imagining in the future, council will be receiving emails from people who have purchased a house and they realize that their water bill is 3 times or 4 times what they'd be paying if they bought somewhere else. And they will say, no one notified us. A realtor didn't tell us. Certainly there wasn't anything in the abstract to bring this to the attention of the examining attorney. How do we think about the disparity in terms of the cost of services for our citizens? How do we possibly navigate this?
I mean, it's not different than many other issues. We don't disclose your electric service provider. We don't tell you what your school taxes are. We don't tell you a lot of things about what you pay to own and operate a home.
Well, I think that's fair on the example of electricity. I don't think it's fair on the school, because if you're buying a house in the school district, okay, I'm living north of Bloomington, I know where I am. But I think this is trickier with, and I appreciate your example with electricity, but this is going to be, if I'm, these numbers are significant. The small residential minimum charge $15.72 under Ames, but $65 for Xenia.
Well, I think there's some responsibility on the potential homeowner. I mean, I think on Beacon, if you look at Beacon, it probably shows who's servicing those. Most people I know, before they buy a house, they always track what the utility costs were, and they ask for it. But
so Beacon doesn't tell you.
But it says water on it. It says the utility. I think it might.
Well, it's something we might
Doesn't have
it's
the-
a good idea. Maybe that's something we should.
I don't know if
we
it
can
does it,
encourage Beacon to
but certainly
show.
you think, I would hope people do due diligence on the efficiency of their homes, and they usually ask what their utility bills were, the average utility bills. But yeah, it's tough for us to. I think it is the same whether you live north of Bloomington or not, and the cost of taxes, cost of utilities. I don't know if we can warn people. We can certainly put things out on the website and stuff where the service territories are. We can help there.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure for every purchase of a home, we can educate the public.
Well, that's sort of my dilemma. I don't have any answers on this, but I'm telling you,
You
that
will get calls.
we're going to get calls and emails.
Well, you get calls now too, as you know, if people are confused about the electric. Just when we're servicing, electricity's on, and maybe where the mayor lives, it's off, or north and Northridge Heights north, it's out. It's frustrating to people.
But I've never had a question though on the fees. I think that's where it affects people with such disparity on the fees. I think I've never had a question on the fees on electricity. Just one other question. So this situation with Xenia is not isolated to Ames, and there have been a series of lawsuits where cities have sued Xenia. And I'm curious, have we discussed with any peer communities the kinds of negotiations we're doing with Xenia? And I'm just curious what the impact of that has been.
I think you're talking about, I think it's the city of Johnson. Is it Johnson? They had a
Yeah.
lawsuit. It's not similar. The issues aren't similar to what we're dealing with here.
But the basic conflict of cities that are growing into Xenia territory, and they want to be able to provide that water. And so I'm just curious, has have we had similar conversations with peer communities? And
Over the years we have.
In what fashion? I mean, the law is clearly on the side of the rural water provider.
We've had expert attorneys in to talk to us.
So, well, I just want to point out, so as Steve mentioned, this issue that we're facing is impacted by two different layers. One is the state law that provides the rural water territories. The second is the federal law that protects them against encroachment into those territories in a way that jeopardizes the USDA loans. So it's pretty clear that that federal pillar isn't going to budge. That's not coming down anytime soon. The state law did change in 2014, if I recall correctly, and that did have some impacts that swung the pendulum towards cities a little bit, in that it held the rural water provider to the same standard of providing water to a property requesting within a certain period of time, or they had to give it up to the city, and also some other changes. But they're really, I think probably the legislature at this point, I don't think is interested in
and I appreciate that. But
addressing that issue.
I apologize. That's really not answering my question. My question is, have we interfaced with peer communities? Is this agreement novel for Xenia? Have they done something like this before?
Nope. It's novel. We might be the model now for other cities.
Oh.
So we don't have John Dunn here tonight. When we first started this, we relied on John through his connections to the water.
No, we've had it. I mean, we've been working on this for years.
I know, but I mean, John is
legal attorneys from other, from Des Moines come in and talk to us, and we just don't have any avenues that could put us in a better light. Right?
For your basic question, though, Xenia does not have an agreement like this.
Right.
That does not exist.
There are agreements that contain parts that are similar to this. So Xenia does provide water service in areas that it also provides the sewer billing and so forth on behalf of a municipality. So we're going to clearly be the largest community that it has that kind of relationship with. But that component of this agreement exists in another model. Other parts of this agreement are modeled after the Central Iowa agreement that we have. But I think this is the first agreement that incorporates all of those different pieces into one comprehensive agreement.
It's unusual. It's not all or nothing. There's certain areas they're willing to sell, certain they're giving time. Certain areas they say I have infrastructure in place, like up north. They're going to say, no, we're not going to sell. We're going to provide it. It's unique.
Well, those are the questions I had. I do want to just take a second to say thank you. Obviously, there's a tremendous amount of work that went in to getting to where we are.
Brian and his team did a great job.
And I know this is a long time to spend on this issue. We have had a very robust discussion on this, but this is a big deal for the future of our community. I think it was worthwhile. I appreciate the in-depth and robust presentation.
For what it's worth, the Beacon list fire districts,
only fire did not water,
but not water. No.
Well, we could work with Beacon to see if they might be able to add that as a component.
Yeah.
Other questions? Brian, I had a couple of questions. One is if there's no 12-month notice, then there's an automatic renewal of the agreement. Is that right?
Yes, of
negotiation.
areas.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then you mentioned something about there's a possibility that they could buy water from Ames if for some reason something happened. So are their mains going to be designed so they could connect with our mains in the future and have some kind of a valve put in there, or how is that going to be thought through? Because if you're, normally if you design mains, you're going to decrease the size of the main as you get farther out because you have less water flow essentially. But if you're going to try and come the other way, that's going to be a different situation.
Yeah, where it really likely comes into play is this area down here on the south, where Xenia infrastructure comes up here to a point but doesn't connect all the way. There's some geographical impediments to getting here.
I don't think they have a main north of 265th. That's why they were willing to sell it. So they don't have large infrastructure north of 265th.
So the way this might play out is if Xenia decided after 5 years that they would like to have this territory back firmly in their control, It would make more sense for them to buy water from Ames and bring it south to serve that area rather than extending infrastructure from the south to the north. So that would be sort of an island of Xenia territory that is not connected to the rest of its service territory infrastructure, but they are Xenia customers. That would,
In the north, they're getting water from Boone, I believe, is coming in,
right.
but not
West.
south.
It's interesting that they, at the rates that you showed, if they were going to buy water from us at a very low rate and then resell it at a very high rate, that would be quite the margin.
And we had a lot of discussions about buying wholesale water. Obviously it's in our interest, so long as we have an available supply of water in our wells, it's in our interest to develop, we get a more efficient system the larger it becomes, on the production side and the administrative side. We talked about, should these areas that are Xenia territory be required to be provided Ames water, just billed by Xenia. And one of the key things that's important to them is simply the cost of the water. They get water at a very cheap rate from other sources, and it would be difficult. It's difficult for us to compete with that cost on a wholesale basis.
But I don't want to speak for their financing, but obviously the customer is being paid to recoup investments from a larger system.
Right.
So I can't tell you why. I don't think it's the water that's driving the cost up, but I haven't studied that. So it could be they just have a lot of investment over a larger area and they have to recoup.
Small density to recoup.
Right.
Yeah.
But
Um,
can't speak to why it's that.
is the buyout provisions limited just to the 10 and 5-year areas that you're showing, or is there the areas that are where we can grow, shown in the green and the purple? Are those also be able to be bought out?
So only the areas that are in these, this blue
Crosshatch.
diamond and the crosshatch here, those are the only areas that they are right now willing to put up as
For sale.
right for sale to
Up north too.
become, yes, and up north here to become part of the Ames water service territory. That doesn't mean that they can't in the future identify some other area that's difficult for them to get to that they'd be willing to have us serve. But the agreement indicates that any transaction of territory takes place at that $3,000 per net acre formula as it escalates over time. But yes, anything that's not in those areas right now is envisioned to be served by Xenia. So these green areas to the west, anything west of that red line, Boone County.
And last question is, and this is maybe unlikely, but what if Xenia goes away? What if they go bankrupt? What happens? How do our customers get water, or how do other customers get water, or will the USDA or government rescue them? There's nothing in the agreement that talks about, if they are unable to provide water service, they're going to be our residents and they need fire protection. I was just curious how that would work, especially if we don't have a connection from our main to their system, which we shouldn't, because you don't want to have, contamination. But
I mean, I can't believe that 10,000 people are going to be left with zero water for a bad business decision by Xenia. So I would assume that there's somebody that can step in. I mean, you can't take water away from that many people.
I understand it, but I think everyone on that dais here, and most people are aware that Xenia had some serious financial problems, and they were on the risk of going out of business. This is quite some time ago. This is not recently, but the point is that not to say that couldn't necessarily happen again. It's just, I'm just thinking about our citizens. I mean, our residents, and but anyway, maybe it's just so far fetched that the government will come in and take.
No, I don't think it's far fetched, but we have examples of this. There would be a receiver established for them, and they would continue to operate under receivership.
Okay. All right. Very good.
I have one question, Kelly, on easements. So generally when property owners working with Xenia, they get an easement across their land. When new subdivisions go in, I would hope that in addition to the Xenia easements, we're still going to reserve an easement for utilities in the favor of the city. Is that fair to assume that there's nothing about this agreement that precludes us in the way in which we would go ahead and reserve broad utility rights?
Yeah, so the expectation is they'll probably be in the right of way, just like we would have been for delivering the water, and they'll have to cite it in relationship to the roads and the sanitary sewer. When you review preliminary plats, they're going to have the fire hydrant and the water and utility systems all shown to us. So we'll know when we approve a subdivision where the Xenia utility lines are going to go in relation to our utilities.
But my point is that we'll still be able to reserve this is not going to impact our ability to reserve easements.
No, I don't think so. I'm not sure exactly what it would be because we're normally just using right of way for the most part to provide water and sewer service.
Okay.
Right. We'd be able to continue to reserve easements, and we have a fairly open right-of-way user policy in that we allow any utility in the right-of-way effectively. So that would be where I would think that they would put their infrastructure is in the right-of-way.
And the fire hydrants need to be there, so the water mains need to be where the fire hydrants are. So
If
they need to pull a main further into a commercial site, they'll have their own Xenia easement. We'll probably ask for those things will get addressed during the subdivision process, essentially.
Thanks.
Okay. Any other questions? I entertain a motion on alternative.
Move alternative 1, which is to approve the attached agreement for water service operations and territory transfer with Xenia Rural Water District.
Second.
Moved in second. Thank you. Any further discussion? All right. Roll call, please.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Thanks, Brian. And I agree with Tim. Thank you for all your efforts. I know you put a lot of time into it, and city manager's office did a lot of work on this. So, all right, move on to item number 15, resolution approving downtown facade grants. Council, does anyone have any questions for staff on this particular item?
Nope.
This is you.
Kelly, is there anything you want to bring to council's attention on this, or is it pretty?
For the facade grant?
Right.
I have nothing else to add.
Okay. All right. I would entertain a motion on resolution.
I would move alternative 1 to approve the facade grant for 317 Main.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? Roll call.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. And item 16, staff report regarding request from the Zoning Board of Adjustment to define temporary in the zoning ordinance. Any questions for Kelly on this one? I think the staff report was well done. Any clarification questions? Otherwise, Kelly, your recommendation was or
Yeah,
suggestion?
I think in our position, if you want to move forward, we're not sure that we need to do this, but if we are, I think addressing the unique issue of the yard waste facility is probably appropriate. If there are some other ideas or other known issues, option 2 would probably be okay. Right now, I can't forecast why we need option 2 exactly. Option 3 is definitely problematic, I think, to administer as described.
Okay.
And Kelly, if we were to approve option 1 with the limited special use permit, that's something that could be the model for other uses in the future if we determine there are things that fall into this category that need to be defined better?
Yeah, potentially. I think under option 1, we're not just finding a different permit process. We're saying this use is eligible for a permit that's of a limited duration, just like we do with the asphalt batch plants.
We limit the risk of unintended consequences, I think, by going with option 1 and narrowly tailoring use of temporary in this context.
Fair discussion? Is there a motion?
Move option 1.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstaining? Motion carried. Anticipating that we're probably going to have a little bit of a time on this next topic. Let's just take a 5-minute break and then we'll reconvene.
Okay.
Do this.
All right, we're going to be back in session and moving on to item 17, Ames 24 Public Plan Draft. Comments? Kelly.
Good evening, Council. This is follow-up to 2 weeks ago where we are reviewing the public comments you've received to date. As we noted in the report, we have all the comments we've received through the 12th. They are included from your prior packet. We received no additional comments before tonight. We're asking for council direction on 3 issues, really. The public comments we received, which are often suggesting a should kind of tone to things. I need direction from council if the council's interested in making any adjustments based on the public comments. Secondly, I have some staff proposed edits to the text as well as map changes that we're going to go through. And then third, you have the new information leading to the crafting of an implementation chapter that will go into the plan before it's adopted. So for tonight, I'm going to talk about what I'm recommending, and then council can bring up other changes or edits they would like to make. The first thing I need to address is in the land use chapter, chapter 2. We talk about the compatibility matrix or the mixed use planning process. And that question came up when we were drafting the plan this summer. What are we supposed to do with this? As we went through the public comment period, it didn't really come up as a question, but it's clear that we need to take action to resolve the ambiguity of it. So staff is recommending that the pages that I identified in the staff report are viewed as guidance. For the most part, they'd be applied to zoning code updates that we do or subdivision standard updates that we do. They would help advise us as we go through those processes rather than apply them to every project that comes through for approval. If council wants to apply them on a project-by-project basis immediately, we would have to add other language to make that clear how that works. So tonight, I'm recommending we don't do that. If council does want to do that, you need to let me know and we'll adjust the language to do that. In regard to some of the other changes in the text, that is the primary issue we have. As we talk about some of the map designations, we do have some suggestions in here as well about how the community commercial retail is explained and where it's affiliated in the zoning tables. So if you take staff's recommendations for the map changes, those will get addressed as well. There's one other inconsistency in the text that I had slipped through on last Friday regarding university land. I'd been in conversation with university officials, and for the most part, university land is shown as civic university, so it's a dark blue shade on the land use map. And we had this conversation a long time ago. Should we be showing a land use for university land in the case it was disposed of in the future? So for the most part, we just made it blue and said it's university land, but we wrote a text policy that indicated that university land should default to the RN3 neighborhood classification in areas where we had an overlay for redirection. Well, we never made an overlay for redirection, so that text is just left hanging there. And in conversations with the university officials, they would prefer to really just have university land as shown as university land. And we don't really have growth shown on university land. So just to keep all the university land as blue and not show any other colors would make sense. We can adjust that text to, instead of reference an overlay that doesn't exist, we can talk about how future changes to the university land would be related to that RN3 neighborhood. Anything else would still need an amendment to the plan. So even though that's not on this list, I think that's something we should address because it's inconsistent between the map and the language.
So what are the 2 areas that you need to change on the map?
So there's 2 properties that are shown as RN3. The former location of the Healthy Life Center on Ontario was shown as RN3. That was based on the fact that we thought they were going to give that land up for the Healthy Life Center. And then there's a piece of property near Mortensen and University that's south of Ryman Gardens that is down by the creek that's also shown as RN3 land. It's university owned. They don't intend to sell that for residential at this point in time. So those 2 would become blue. Everything else was already blue on the map. All the area south of Highway 30 was shown as blue. All the research fields along Mortensen are already blue. So we're not taking anything away, really. We're just kind of cleaning up that area. Vinker was also discussed. Vinker is shown as open space. We would keep that as open space because it is even though it's university owned, it is open to the public for public use for recreation. So they were fine having Vinker shown as an open space rather than as a university facility. So that's not in there, but with motion tonight to make adjustments regarding the university property, I would appreciate that. I think I'm not going to go through each one of the map amendments in the report. If you want to take action on each of these, then that's what I think you guys can discuss with me as we go through this. As you know, in the attachment to the report, attachment B, I have a number of map changes that staff are suggesting. So there's probably about 24 edits to the map for various reasons. Some of them are inconsistencies. Some of them just don't match up ultimately with what we had decided the meaning of different terminology was. Some of them don't reflect existing conditions well. So those are why those are there. So I'd be looking for a motion to say, move forward with changes as represented in attachment B if you're comfortable with my edits to the map. As described. And then finally, in the implementation chapter, that's attachment C to the report. We don't have an implementation chapter yet. I needed to get direction from you on exactly how to proceed so RDG can prepare that and attach that to the plan. Ultimately, what we're asking for is that we prioritize our efforts. The plan has a lot of concepts and values in it. We need to have some focus on where to start to implement the plan. We have it broken down into 3 topics. The first one, as Steve alluded to earlier, is to work on having a capital investment strategy. And at this point, what we're just putting in place is a policy about having a capital improvements program page that addresses the needs for this. And we'll come back with specific projects to move that forward through the CIP process. The next 2 topics are more related to the policies of zoning and land use and issues around the things that are the primary issue for the plan. So we have to make changes to the zoning code and the subdivision code. And to try to give some focus to those, I've given you a list of what I believe are kind of the main issues that I think are embedded in the different policies, whether it's in the housing chapter, whether it's in the land use chapter, whether it's in the community character chapter. I'm trying to take generally the themes from those topics and kind of turn them into a list that we can address. So this means a lot of these are to modify standards. Some of them are to first go through an assessment process or a study, determine what we really want to do as a refinement before we adopt a change. And there's kind of a mix there. The way I see this working for us over the next 5 years is this should be the first check when we talk about a work plan for the Planning and Housing Department. So City Council sets goals. This should be evaluated. You can prioritize up and down in that process. You could still add something in your goal setting, but this should help inform goal setting on your priorities over the next 5 years. And then finally, the topic of other plans. So there's some related plans that need to be updated to reflect this. The Parks Master Plan is one example. There's sub-area planning that's expected to be done for some of those areas that we left for further consideration. And those are, again, they're placed there to help guide the council on things that need to be addressed to really reach the vision of the plan. So we think those are the priorities that should end up in the implementation chapter. The implementation chapter will also include some administration language to help us guide how we do amendments. The current plan talks about how a minor amendment and a major amendment process work. We'll bring some of that stuff forward as well. So there'll be a little bit more to it than just a priority project list, but it's really the nuts and bolts of administration rather than policy itself. So that's the end of my comments for tonight. Obviously, there's a lot of comments in here and some other suggested changes, and I'd prefer just to react kind of to what the council's interested in at this point.
Let's go through as your staff report, go through text changes and see if there's any questions. Pick up the motions as we go along to be efficient. Make sure we catch everything. Kelly, if you want to make sure you can make sure we get the motions that you may feel that you need in order to move forward. So text changes. Questions, comments? Everyone clear on what Kelly's talking about in terms of the project review process, mixed use matrix?
So we need a motion just on that if that's the only change. Be good to put in the record. So
right.
What's the motion you want?
Yeah, so if you want to just go individual motions, the first motion would be to to direct staff to make the mixed use land use matrix pages advisory rather than mandatory for project review.
So moved?
Second.
Discussion? Those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? David, is there any questions that you have or comments you want to make regarding text changes?
Thanks for asking. Yes, about the natural areas. This was discussed in the report too, and I would move to ask staff to clarify in the plan that the natural area label in the future land use map is meant as an informational tool.
Second.
Moved in second. Thank you. Any discussion?
Is that clear, Kelly?
Yeah, that's perfectly clear. We described there's two ways to go. That helps us. That kind of reflects how the current land use policy plan is set up with a separate map with environmental resources different from land use designations.
And then I'll just also mention that this is not regarding the fringe map. The fringe map has a separate designation for natural areas that has sort of different meanings. We're not talking about that right now.
Right. It'll come up during the fringe plan update. I think we'll have to address that, but it'll show as informational across the board for us at this point.
Those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Carried. Thank you. Any other text amendments? David, do you have anything else on our text changes?
There was one part of the staff report that made sense to me. I saw a recommendation that in the land use designation of community commercial retail, that we remove the zone that is the community commercial residential zone as one of the listed compatible zones. Does that sound familiar, Kelly?
Yep.
So I would move that we make that change.
Kelly, you want to, Kelly, can you restate that
Second.
motion? Oh, you got
Okay,
it?
it's moved in second.
You have it? Okay, make sure we got it.
Everyone
Did you
understand?
ask me to restate or?
No, I just want to make sure.
Everybody heard you. We're good.
Try to make sure that Amy caught your motion, David. That was all.
Yep, we'll get it right.
Everybody understand the motion?
Kelly, could you walk through the implications of this?
Yeah, so David, it was to add the CCR zoning to the NC mixed use and to remove it from the community commercial retail. So Amy, read back what he asked.
I actually didn't mention the NC mixed use in my motion.
Okay. So that,
So I only did half of it.
yeah, so we had referenced in the staff report that in the community commercial retail district, it used CCR, which is a little confusing. It allows for mixed use. And for the most part, we aren't looking for housing to be built on South Duff Avenue or Southeast 16th Street. So we want to remove that from the list of implementing zones of the community commercial retail designation.
So make sure we get the right motion then.
So that's, David said that's exclusively the limit of it, right? Was to remove it.
Yes.
Okay.
Do you have that, Amy? And you need Kelly to help you there.
So just to remove the CCR zone from the community commercial retail designation.
There's some
And this
duplication.
was discussed, if I recall correctly, in the bottom of page 3 of the staff report. It's the paragraph, it's the part of the paragraph that's in bold.
Yeah.
Did you catch that, Amy? So yeah, it's okay. Everyone understand the motion? Those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. Anything else, David?
Yeah, so you mentioned the NCMU part of this, and I know I just discussed this with you earlier today. This seems like kind of a last minute thing, so I don't really want to spring it on you, but I would like, maybe you're ready, I would ask for your thoughts on whether we should move towards adding the community commercial residential as a compatible type zone to the MCMU designation, or is that something we should take under advisement for now?
I think I'd want to look into that as we go into public hearings. I think this came into light from the Haverkamp comment. The NCMU designation doesn't correlate to CCR zoning, which is what the zone is of all of those properties there. So that spurred me to make one recommendation for a change, but it does still call into question some of the zoning details out here. But you're right, I don't have a final answer that I would make a recommendation on it tonight.
Okay, so no motion, and thanks.
Okay.
And just a point of clarification, I think, David, you said community commercial residential. I think you meant community commercial retail. Is that right?
Correct. My question was about adding community commercial residential zoning compatibility to the NCMU designation.
Okay, very good. Anything else, David? On text?
I don't think so. I'll shout at you later if I remember. Thanks.
Thank you. Anybody else have any other requested changes under text changes?
So I'd bring up the university one, which is kind of a mix of both. So what I would be looking for is for staff to make an edit to page 64 in relation to the redirection area text for university civic land use designation, and to remove the overlay concept, and then to make the corresponding map change to the two properties, one on Ontario and one on University.
So moved.
Second.
I'm sorry, we're saying on page 63?
I think
that's employment.
Should be 64, I believe, is the note I had.
Redirection.
Bottom bullet in the middle column.
Yeah,
Page 64.
So on page 64, the bottom bullet of redirection areas addresses university civic land or civic or public land. That's the bullet that's inconsistent with the map.
On their development guidelines on page 64.
Yep.
The last bullet. The change would be what?
It references that the map will have a redirection overlay. That doesn't exist. So it'll be adjusted to talk about RN3 in relation to university civic land, but it won't have an overlay on the map for it.
Okay. Yeah, so moved and seconded to that end. Any other discussion? Those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Carried. We good on text changes?
Yeah, I
All
have
right.
no other recommendations.
Okay,
on that
all right.
front.
We'll move on then to map amendments and land use designations. You mentioned something about one of the amendments was a couple of minor changes on the map regarding the location of university land. Is that correct?
So that was tied into that last motion that the location on Ontario and the second one on University would be changed to just be University rather than this implied redirection area overlay.
So that got cleaned up?
Yes.
Okay. So I think the second recommendation was to approve the changes that are on attachment B, I believe it is, or exhibit B.
So attachment B is all of staff's recommended changes to the future land use map that we've addressed up to date. It does not necessarily, it doesn't incorporate all the other map comments that you've received from the public necessarily. Those are individual questions.
Okay. So are there any questions for Kelly on, is that exhibit B? Is that what it's called?
Yes.
Attachment
B.
Attachment B. Any questions for Kelly?
I do have a question on this. If I'm looking at the map now with the comments on top of it, and I see it sort of expresses the intent of the changes to be made to the map. If we were to just make a motion and approve this set of changes, are you planning to then incorporate the changes into a new map and bring it back to us again before public hearing? Or is this something that you would do something to the map that you find consistent with this description, and that's what goes out to public hearing without further review?
Yeah. My intent was to go straight to public hearing after tonight unless council asked for something specifically to come back to you before that. So I think at least with my intent on this map, there's not a lot of discretion on where the line goes. Plus the boundaries are supposed to be fuzzy on purpose. So like the level of precision here is not very, very high. So I didn't think I really needed to come to council to gauge that and how well we did with that at this point. I think in the public hearing process, you would be able to respond to that just as easily.
In that case, I do have just a couple of questions so that I understand all of the items on this map.
Okay.
One of my questions is right on the west edge of town. There's a box labeled West If County Line as core. And so I suspect that this actually means that if for the area that is west of the county line, it should be labeled NC. Is that what this means, or is it some other core?
It should have been west of county line. So the question there is what we brought up. I have it up on screen, David, up here, is we ended up with a large compilation of small areas as commercial and mixed use, and it's probably not really how it would work. So I said we could put a core designation there as well, instead of that community commercial retail, which is kind of small as community commercial retail. And then there's some other adjustments to the NC and the NCMU
okay, so that's
also.
Part of it, but you're saying that that's actually a core designation like campus town or downtown, not NC, neighborhood core.
So we also had a core in the south growth area. So that was the thinking there, that except for the scale is a lot different than the south, but the idea that you could mix or integrate the housing seemed to fit with that as well, based on how we did it in the south. We could also just leave it as NCMU, and that accomplishes many of the same purposes. It just doesn't indicate as much housing would go there.
Okay, I get it. I just wanted to understand what you were saying, but I think I do now. And then there's the largest text box, which is kind of to the southeast of this area, says intended mix of uses is confusing as represented. Modify to NCMU and expand RN3. That's a little hard to envision exactly what the result of all those changes is. Is there anything you can say about it to us tonight?
Yeah, I think the goal there was there's just too many layers. We're talking about like 120-foot swath of land here, which isn't enough land. So for me, the main MCU block, which is the darker pink, that would stay. The lighter pink would, for the most part, become yellow. There'd be a little bit of the pink retained on Lincoln Way, but basically the pink that goes north of the dark block would become yellow for RN3.
I see. Good. Thank you. And then just one more. The Ontario, there's a comment saying adjust park concept to greenway. It points to a future greenway.
Right. So so we didn't label parks in all of the growth areas. In the West, we did do that. We weren't trying to illustrate that center location had to be a park, and we had conversations of linking parks to greenways as part of the plan. So it seemed more appropriate to kind of shift it to the north than to just drop it in the middle of this growth area. That's why I'm saying shift it to the north, because it relates to that greenway concept better as an intent.
So the green actually is to move to where the cloud outline.
Yes, yeah. So the green would move up to the bubble on Ontario.
Okay. Thanks. I understand now. And those are all the questions I have on the map.
Kelly, could you just comment on, we had a discussion this afternoon just about if there's more school land, needed, for example, in the southeast, how that might be handled versus showing it actually on the map right now.
Yeah, so we haven't in the past really shown school or potential school ownership options on the land use map. I think in our text we talk about there may be needs for parks and schools and things to be added as growth areas build out, but we don't have them shown on the map. And I think in our conversations with the school districts, it's really hard for them to really respond to something that might be 10 years away from being in need, especially if it's on the fringe of their territory. So my recommendation right now is to not necessarily put a land use blob down for a school. Definitely be in contact with them and make them aware of this, and probably on a more regular basis, try maybe on an annual basis, keep them aware of what's happening. They've been asking more recently for permit records, so they're a little bit more on top of changes in demographics in the district from the last few years. Before, they didn't used to do that necessarily. So that's a convenient time to talk about the direction of growth and the trends of growth.
I think the school district wisely tried to allow for expansion, in our elementary schools for sake of discussion, but the down there in the southeast, I think Cape Mitchell is pretty landlocked there. So that might be an area we might need schools in the future. But we don't want to overstep our bounds. That's their responsibility, not our responsibility. So. Okay. Any other questions on the map?
Kelly, with regard to the lower right, delete RN5 south of Iowa Creek, what goes there if we delete that?
It'll go back to the open space designation. So that property is zoned ag right now because it's all floodplain. So we didn't want to imply that there is infill opportunities there that are not realistic. That's really just a lack of mapping detail until now.
Anything else? All right, I'd entertain a motion on approving the map as amended by the staff on attachment B.
I have a question. So were we going to take up any of the other map amendments and land use designations? That's to come.
Yes, thought was let's start with this one, and then we can go ahead and make more changes if we want to. Yeah.
Well, so wait a minute. Aren't these reflected on the map?
Not all of them. So are you talking about the list in the staff report?
Yeah.
They're not all reflected here because if I'm not suggesting them, they're not shown. Like, for example, the questions about the expanded natural area designations, they're not shown here.
Oh, okay. Well, because I was looking at that. Well, now you've zoomed out. It's the area that I think is Westtown down there, changed to community commercial. Is that the one that is mentioned?
That area is. This does not reflect the request, though.
Right.
Right. So this property right here is the property that's asking to be RN5 rather than CCR, or rather than NCMU as this is shown.
Okay, then if staff wants to, if council wants to make recommended changes to this, let's go ahead and make those motions. Then we'll go ahead and take a motion to approve the map as amended by staff and council. Go ahead, Gloria. You have a question on that? On which? On this particular area. You talked about the fact that it was in the staff report. He talked about this is not reflect what he showed in the staff report is not reflected here on the map. Do you have a question or any?
No, I was just wondering if that was what was reflected here.
Yep.
Don't we have a motion on the table now, right?
No, I just asked if there was, but no one moved.
I'm sorry.
It's okay.
I got distracted by the NCMU issue. So in that area, your recommendation is to go with the CCR.
Yeah, so
but
that
we could do the other.
So that shape, I think, pretty clearly should be CCR, not MCMU, based on the patterns of what are around there. And then that west half of it could stay NCMU because there is some mixed use buildings here. But Mr. Haverkamp's advocating for RN5 for his piece because for the reasons in his argument that he believes it's more residential and he can do mixed use with RH zoning and still kind of be what he is, but have better options within his existing buildings. And I think you can look at that either way as whether it's a transitional RN5 property or is it a NCMU property.
Would there be any downsides if we went with the RN5?
You will not, it's going to take a subsequent rezoning step to get to his ultimate goal. So if you make it RN5, you would have to look at an RH rezoning request and decide, is it consistent with the intent? And if it is, it can be approved. If for other reasons you don't believe it is, then you still don't have to approve the rezone.
Right.
So this is one step towards the goal that's described in that letter.
But there's nothing substantively, you don't have any concerns about the RN5 designation for this parcel?
I don't have concerns about the designation. I think the details of the rezoning request is where we have to pay attention to it.
Sure. Okay. Well, I'll go ahead and make a motion that that this area, and how do I properly designate this in the motion, Kelly? That the Haverkamp parcel?
I think you can just say you're responding to that comment letter.
Yeah.
From Mr. Haverkamp for
The
West.
area referenced to Mr. Haverkamp's letter be designated as RN5.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion?
Yeah, I oppose this. I just think that this is too big of a change to just slip into something that is, that we're doing here. I think I understand why he wants this to happen, but I just don't think we are giving it the right amount of deliberation to make that change at this point. So I'm not going to support it.
So what information would we need? I mean, we have information about how the property is currently used and the challenges of being able to use it in its current zoning classification. I'm not being critical of the original plan. It's just that history hasn't borne out that it's worked out that way. And the RN5 would, I think, be the best designation. Is there anything more, David, that that you would want us to look at?
I would rather put it on an agenda for discussion than just make it. I mean, this is effectively a change to the comprehensive plan for this district based on one request with no further discussion. My recollection of the request is that he pointed to the difficulties of short-term rental use in these properties, but these properties are also available for full-on commercial use, if I understand this correctly. So this just doesn't add up in my mind. I don't think we're getting the whole story at this point.
Other comments?
I could be wrong about it, but I think we haven't discussed it. So that's why I think it needs more explanation.
Okay.
Kelly, any comments in response? I mean, is there something there that David said that you found merits further inquiry?
That's why I said that the request is really about a lot of later details, more so than the comprehensive plan designation itself. So my comment still stands that either designation allows for mixed use on the property in the future. It's the details of how that's done that's really a secondary step after tonight.
So this is just the first step, David. I mean, and staff is supportive of either the CCR or the RN5. I don't know.
The staff report said it was supportive of CCR or NCMU, right? Not RN5?
It says RN5.
I think we said we were indifferent.
It says it could be either CCR or RN5.
Oops, yeah. Sorry, it's a little awkward to page up and down on here.
Yeah, page 2, bold, number 2. Staff recommends the area.
The overall area is NCMU, CCR, but that specific property.
Yeah, so that one could be either, depending on the view of the area. Is it primarily mixed use and commercial, or is it, again, the multifamily starts here and continues west? So is it the transition piece, or is it a core piece of the commercial designation? There's always that question on the table of where's the transition start.
I think, David, I asked Kelly about this yesterday, and one of the concerns is that it wouldn't be that easy to change the properties that are currently being used as short-term rentals back to retail spaces because of the construction that's been done in them. Is that?
I just think that tonight as a Plan 2040 document, that's just way beyond the scope of where we are tonight. So I think if the council's not comfortable with the specific details, you could just say, I want to discuss this as a separate issue on a future agenda. But I think it's a little far beyond our level of discussion tonight to go through the details of that. So you can either say did you make a motion, Tim?
I did, yeah.
So that motion, if that happens and that gets approved, it'll come back in details through a rezoning request. If that fails and you want to talk about it as a separate issue on another night as a plan amendment or some other, another tool to get there, that could be a wholly separate issue.
Right.
But I think we're kind of beyond Plan 2040 level at this point.
Everyone understand the motion? Those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
Motion carried. Sorry, motion failed. Okay. Other questions on the map?
Well, so we just left that hanging. Does that mean that we will automatically return to that as a question of plan amendment, or is that something that we would
I
need
think
to?
you have to give me direction on what to do with anything. If you do nothing else, it's not going to come up again.
Well, how do we do this? I mean, if you guys know the property, we're leaving an important piece of property just hanging. So if you don't, I'm open to suggestions, sir. I don't know
So
what
the other option is to put on an agenda for future discussion, just outside of the Ames Plan 2040 process, and review the zoning options, review land use choices. That's an option, just like any other referral request. I think they're trying to avoid that referral process if it was viewed as fitting in Plan 2040 as this land use designation.
So Mayor, would this be an appropriate time to do that?
Yes.
So Mayor, I move that we place Mr. Haverkamp's letter on a future agenda.
Is there a second?
Second.
I'll second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carried. Okay. Anything else on the map? David, do you have anything else on the map that you have questions or want to draw attention to?
No, thanks. I'm ready to make a motion regarding the map if others are ready.
Okay, let's see if anyone else. Anyone else have? Brown, you good?
I'm good.
How about you, Amber?
I'm good.
Rachel? Tim, any other questions you have? Gloria, are you good?
Good.
And Kelly, if we picked everything up from the staff report that you have brought to our attention that may not be reflected on this map.
It's everything I'm aware of right now.
Okay. All right, David, go ahead.
I would move that we adopt the edits indicated on the map and staff report.
Attachment B.
Whichever attachment that was. I'm sorry, I don't.
B.
Have that.
Attachment B. Yep. Okay.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Okay, Kelly, now we're going to go from maps to, where are we going next? To implementation chapter, is that correct?
Yep, and this can, I mean, if you're comfortable with the list as described, you can do direct staff to move forward with attachment C in preparation of the implementation chapter.
Okay, David, I'll see. Do you have any questions or comments on the implementation chapter that's proposed?
I do have one question, and that is there is a bullet that states initiate new South Lincoln mixed use sub-area plan from Cherry Street to Walnut Avenue. I just don't remember discussing this previously. Can you just remind us what the idea of that sub-area plan is going to be?
Yeah, so I'm just bringing up the map, David, so we can see that.
This would be under plans and sub areas. It would be the first item after the circular bullets. Then,
so up on the screen is the tan area, because it depends which screen you're looking at. So 3rd Street runs through the area. It goes from Walnut up to Lincoln Way, and then over, and that's currently the South Lincoln mixed use district. In the sub area chapter of the comprehensive plan, RDG prepared some concept work for that area around Lincoln Way. We know the South Lincoln mixed use district isn't really succeeding as a zoning district in terms of really providing opportunities probably for the vision that we had for that area. So it's shown on the map as a redirection area. So we're recommending to prioritize that particular redirection area for a new sub area plan. It's shown on the map, and then it's identified to some degree in the housing chapter with the sub area plans.
That helpful, David?
I guess I can't see the map that you have on the screens in the room. So I just don't see the redirection area labeled there. Isn't this the area?
It's
that
North
GC we were talking about earlier, expanding the GC.
No, it's not. It's to the west of that. So it's
the target, right?
So think like Walnut, Kellogg, that area, with 3rd Street through that, and then up to Lincoln Way on the corner. So it's on the map colored as redirection, but it doesn't have the redirection
It doesn't
label.
have the word there. That's all. Okay,
So the color matches redirection. So that's one that didn't get labeled. So that's the area it's focused on.
Yeah, thank you. That covers it for me.
Okay.
And you'll pick that up, Kelly, then in terms of putting a label on it then or something?
Yeah.
Or try and make sure it's highlighted. Okay. All right. Council, any other questions on the implementation plan? If not, entertain a motion adopting attachment C.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion? Those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. Anything else, Kelly?
Only if there's other comments or edits from council.
We'll be back.
All right.
So our goal is to be back to you in December. We really all think we want to get this done before the end of the year. So that's the plan at this point.
All right. Very good. Thank you very much. Appreciate your time. Moving on to item 18, car park agility course.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council members. I have with me tonight Joshua Thompson, who's our Parks and Facilities Superintendent. I think most of you know him, but I wanted to introduce him. He's been taking the lead on this agility course project, been leading conversations with the neighbors, with the Parks and Recreation Commission. So thought it was appropriate that he continue through and just share things with you tonight. So turn it over to Joshua as soon as we get the.
It must be taking a while to load. The slides are about 100 slides, so if you have time, it won't take very long.
Oh, short.
That was really
You
funny.
want to take a break now, or do you want to do it in between?
I was actually going to say, I think the staff report well done. Any questions for staff? I think you honestly,
It was a good one.
the staff was really, the report was very well done. I think that you attached all the comments. I think council has read all the feedback we gotten from the community. So just give us a high level, real quick snapshot.
Yeah,
I think
I'll go quickly and stop me if you have any questions.
and just
There's
push,
only like
just push fast on the 100 slides and go through it.
So talk about what is an agility course, the criteria selected, and talk about the feedback. A lot of that's outlined in the council action form. But we do receive requests. We have received requests of, hey, can you guys diversify your play equipment? A lot of the parks that we have a lot of the same post and deck equipment with slides off it. We're trying to do that. And then it also offers an opportunity for us to program, specifically after this COVID thing, the last couple of years. People want to use the parks, and we're able to program that. So this is an example of an agility course. A lot of equipment there, spread out. Some other examples of the specific equipment.
Can you just go back just for one quick question?
Yes, sir.
That's not an actual image showing what it would look like, or that's not like superimposed on Car Park, is it? That's just,
No.
That's just an example.
No, this park is near St. Louis.
Thank you.
So it's a good spot, Steve.
It's a good spot.
Just examples of equipment, quintuple steps, the spider wall. I think once this whole thing is done, if council approves it, I think we should have like a competition between the mayor
For
and
sure.
the city manager
Yeah.
during the ribbon cutting.
No contest
to do
there.
this.
Well, I think
This-
that and between us and
Sounds
city
like a
council, I
perfect
think.
plan.
You do that too.
Here
Do
we
that as well. We have a ledge wall. You can see different different age groups of individuals using that is same as the overhead ladder in the picture on the right. They call that a ledge bridge on the left, and then your typical rope climber on the right. You got balance beams, a wheel bridge. Those wheels are they look like steering wheels. They're manipulated when you grab onto them, so it is a challenge. The city of Davenport actually has an agility course. They have received such positive feedback. They're actually going to install another one, and then potentially a total of 3 in the city. So it's been very well received throughout the city. Another picture, a couple pictures there. This is the criteria. It's outlined in the council action form. But just to talk about a couple things, visibility from the road. In every park that we have and development that we do, renovation in a park, we follow SEPTED principles, crime prevention through environmental design. We want to remove barriers, so individuals can see through the park, see that it's safe. When police officers drive by, they don't have to get out of their vehicles to make sure that everything is well there. We want the same for this, obviously every park, but in this park as well. So these are the parks that we thought best meet the best criteria. We went through every park very extensively. This is how the matrix stacked out. This is how it tested out. Car Park meets all those criteria. We had 4 opportunities for individuals to provide public feedback or public input. The first meeting, we had 2 individuals. The second meeting, we had previous to that sent out a letter, which is in the council action form, to over 400 people. Had about 30 people show up. And then at the September 16th commission meeting, we presented to the commission solutions to some of the concerns and the questions that the neighborhood had. And, we said we'd come back in October, which we did. And they recommended to city council that it be placed in Car Park. These are some of the topics and concerns that were brought up by the neighborhood. All those we're going to address. We described that in the council action form. Picture on the left is, I believe, 2007, 2008, when when the pool was still there. This is the picture on the right, what it looks like today. And then future plans for the park, use the green space that's out in front of the current bathhouse for the agility course. We're going to demolish the bathhouse, provide a shelter and a restroom. City council, you guys provided recommended or approved, additional community gardens, which are going to be very well received. And then one of the comments is provide additional sidewalk to make that continuous from the south side of the property to the north side of the property. And then there's a mid-block crossing up there on Meadow Lane that we will remove. That was a concern from one of the neighbors. So we'll take care of that issue as well. So,
Josh, remind us, were we going to add water for the community gardens? Because right now people have to haul in their own water.
It's good question. Yes, we are providing that, and that will be in place before next spring.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Yep. Any other questions or concerns, comments that I can address, or Keith and I can address?
I just want to note that one of the comments commented on how patient you were. So I appreciate seeing that, and I appreciate you handling the residents respectfully and patiently as they voice their concerns.
No, I enjoy doing those meetings. We enjoy getting out and receiving feedback. Sometimes it's tough, but that's our job. And so it was good.
Could you speak to the issue of parking there, the adequacy of parking?
Yeah.
Bring back the slide just so we could see that.
Sorry. Currently, the parking lot has 30 spaces, has 2 accessible spots. In addition to the 30 spaces, has 2 accessible spots. We're going to review the parking lot the way it's laid out currently, and to see if there's a better, more efficient use of those parking spaces. We feel that the parking lot is adequate for the amount of traffic that is there or that comes there. The trails across East River Valley are very, very popular. So, but then also cross-country ski trails in the wintertime are very popular. The only time that I have ever seen, or Keith and I have ever seen it full, is during cross-country skiing, which is basically the only use during the wintertime that they're getting at that park. We'll continue to evaluate it as obviously we're going to have additional community garden space. We're going to have a park and a shelter there. So we'll continue to evaluate that over time, but we want to make sure that the first and foremost, the way the parking lot is set up now is the most efficient use of it.
My only concern was long-term, if this parking is going to be enough. Longer term, as we hopefully will be able to expand the trail further north and eventually hopefully to Ada Hayden on the north, and then south, the trail ends really at Lincoln Way. Once that trail goes all the way down to South 16th, it's not a big prediction on my part. This is going to be a very heavily used trail, but people can park a number of different places to access the trail, so it doesn't have to be there. But I'm just concerned if you wanted to expand the trail, then I'm almost wondering, would it be worthwhile thinking about the location of the community gardens now before you add additional garden space?
Yeah, it's something we can look at. Keith and I will get together and talk to staff and just see if there's a different location in Car Park. But we feel like right there is a good location. We can't. I don't know. We'd have to talk to planning if we can add additional parking to that area without some other. Yeah, which is something we'd have to talk to planning about.
That's why it's grandfathered in. There's heavier requirements now.
Yeah.
If you expand it, so you got to be careful.
Yeah, one other.
Realize that.
Well, one other option too is you see the trail past the gardens that goes over to North River Valley Park, and right by the restroom and the horseshoe courts, there are parking spots, and then there is another smaller parking lot as well. So I think what we'd probably try to do is before we add additional parking, maybe try to educate those other components. You don't have to park by the softball diamonds. And then come that way. There are a couple of closer parking areas that we could utilize. That would be another option.
A lot of people walk their dogs on the area east of the river. Very, very heavily used for dog walking.
Yep.
So Joshua, you mentioned the 2 accessible spaces. Will we have any components of this course that'll be usable for folks who may be in wheelchairs, who want to do upper body workouts or anything? I know that's not strictly speaking agility, that's more strength building, but
during our neighborhood input sessions, there was individuals that asked if there could be any type of equipment could there be accessed from the ground, and so we're going to look into that. Typically, this equipment is not, but like I said in the staff report, we wanted as many individuals to utilize this equipment as possible. So it's something during the design phase when we meet with the manufacturers of what we could provide.
It's presumed that you'll have copious amounts of bike racks too. So kids can, I can anticipate it'd be a great place for people to, bike to also.
Yeah, it's something typical that we put in our neighborhood parks, in our community parks. Yes.
Other questions?
You guys are taking it easy on them.
Pardon me?
Throw some hard questions at them.
Do you have any suggestions?
I think we're all shell shocked.
My question is from a couple of the commenters asked about this. What is the long-term maintenance cost of this? Or maybe I should just ask, do you feel confident that the revenues that are established are adequate in order to maintain this over a long period of time?
Yes. Our budget is able to maintain. Things do break, we will get that fixed as soon as possible. If not, if we have to order something, we'll close the facility or whatever. But typically, that is not an issue that we have to deal with.
And you've also considered the cost of the ground material as well in that, right?
That is correct. Obviously, the initial cost of putting down the surfacing is the most expensive part. The surfacing will have to replace between 10 and 12, 7 to 10. It all depends on the use, but it's around 10 years. Obviously, that you're not replacing the entire surfacing. It's basically just the top layer. So it's around $7 to $8 per square foot at that point.
Thanks.
Yep.
And when you say the top layer, you're talking the rubber. The concrete obviously underneath does not get replaced.
Correct.
Other questions for them?
Just a comment. I really appreciate the way we're distributing some of these amenities around the community. So whether it's the water pad and West Ames, this and this, I appreciate the thoughtfulness in trying to distribute these amenities around the community. I think it's good.
Thank you.
All right, open up public comment. Is anyone who wants to address council on this topic? Seeing or hearing none, we'll close public input. Any further questions? All right, entertain a motion.
I would move alternative 1 to approve placement of the agility course equipment in car park.
Second.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Those in favor of the motion, please say, I'm sorry, you need a roll call.
Corey.
Aye.
Martin. Aye. Dee Hansen.
Aye.
Betcher.
Aye.
Garten.
Aye.
John.
Aye.
Thank you. And it's not on the agenda, but do you have any update on the pool, the leak on the pool? Can you, since you're here, is that taken care of? We had a leak at the beginning of the year.
So the
The leak in the lazy river.
The water.
in the lazy river.
I think so. Yeah.
Yep. So what we've done is, and then I guess I'll just have Joshua. He's been working with our staff on getting this done. So I'll let him explain.
Yeah, so we've isolated the issue to one pipe. It's at there's a drain in the island of the lazy river that drains down into the lazy river. It's about a 30-foot section of pipe. We've televised it, done all that stuff. We've gotten quotes. The initial quote is around $20,000. It'll be replaced. They're going to line it at some point. We're waiting on another contractor to give us another quote so we can make sure that we're comparing apples to apples, but it'll be completed there might have to be a little bit of concrete work done to line it just because it's not a straight shot, but we'll get that taken care of before next spring. So.
Good. All right.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Thanks.
Thanks.
All right. Going to move on to item number 19, hearing on vacating utility easement across Red Lobster property located at 1100 Buckeye Avenue.
Mayor, I'm going to ask that the council continue this public hearing until the next meeting. We don't have the new signed easements from Red Lobster yet. We had thought we were going to have them by today, but I just confirmed with Vicky that they haven't come in yet. They're expected on Friday. So we don't want to vacate the old utility easements until we have the new easements signed.
Okay. So I'll go ahead and open the public hearing then, and then make a motion to continue it, right?
Yeah.
All right. So declare a public hearing on vacating utility easement across Red Lobster property located at 1100 Buckeye Avenue to be open. Entertain a motion to continue hearing to the next council meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. All right. We covered the disposition of communication and council comments. Trevor.
Yes, just a few things tonight. So tomorrow is the joint city council and student government meeting. I set out the agenda earlier today, so if there's any questions about that, I'm happy to answer. If not, I know that I and the rest of student government are really looking forward to that. So that'll be exciting. And then I'm meeting with a senator tomorrow about some different project ideas that I'll probably be discussing next week. So
Thank you.
that is all.
Thank you. Bronwyn?
Nothing for me. Thank you.
Nothing for me.
Rachel?
Nothing tonight, thanks.
Tim?
We received a letter from Rainey Friedrich on parcel called Carr Avenue. I'm sorry, not Carr, Adam Street. It's a side street that comes off Dawes that has not been paved. And I would propose that we put this letter on a future agenda. We currently have a policy that we expect the adjoining property owners to pay for the paving, but I am concerned that there are, and there may be others in the community that I'm just not thinking of, but short portions like this, that the cost of pavement would be excessive for the adjoining property owners, and this will never, ever get paved. And so I'd like to bring this up on a future agenda. We could take a closer look at this.
Is there a second?
A second.
Okay.
Did we all actually get that email?
I did.
Oh, because I don't know whether it got filtered out or what, but I saw Tim's email about it, but I don't think I ever saw the original.
I can forward it again. Actually, Gloria's correct. I am. This was a comment that Rainey gave to me, and I put this in an email to council. So it was not an email from Rainey. You're correct.
Okay. Those in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nothing further.
Thank you. Gloria?
I'm looking forward to the meeting tomorrow with student government, and I think that's about it, other than wishing people a happy Halloween and a safe trick-or-treating around the community.
Thank you. David?
No comments tonight, thank you.
All right. Well, encourage everybody to get out and vote next Tuesday night. I think that we'll get good participation. Also, students, hopefully, will be encouraging them to vote and be engaged. I'm sure that they will. And it was a great game on Saturday. Nice way to conclude homecoming. And I must say that the parade was really well done. And kudos to the people that organized the parade. The homecoming committee did a great job.
Yep.
Nice celebration. So with that, entertain. Oh, but the other thing is we had a climate action plan town hall. And for those that might have had observed when we were during COVID, when we were doing the plaza design, the consultant used like this instantaneous feedback where you go ahead and text an answer to a number and it shows up on the screen. They used it quite a few times last night. I thought it was very helpful to kind of see an instantaneous response. They even had one that did a word collage or whatever, and kind of, so it was very, I thought it was very good. And I talked to one of our feedback committee members, and she had been to a couple meetings already and said that this one was very, very engaging, and she was very complimentary. So thank you to Susan and Mary and Kaylee and Deb. All did a great job running it, and looking forward to that continuing. So with that, entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move we adjourn.
We are adjourned. Good night.